What if the only way to survive is to break every rule you thought kept you safe? Aiden and Lila thought they were just exploring an abandoned canyon until they found themselves trapped in a nightmare of shifting stones, living reflections, and voices that begged them to surrender their souls. Every step deeper brought them closer to an ancient evil that wanted more than their lives. It wanted to wear their faces. This is a story about love, survival, and the terrifying price of refusing to let go. Listen closely, because once you hear the whispers, they never truly leave you. I used to think the desert was empty, a vast, sunburned expanse of red sand and wind-battered stone, silent, unfeeling, almost serene in its cruelty. But that morning, as the first pink light crawled up the sandstone towers of Red Hollow Canyon, I realized just how alive the desert could be. Alive and watching. The tires of my aging Ford Bronco crunched over the dirt track, the suspension groaning like an old man getting out of bed. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. Next to me, Lila was leaning halfway out the window, her camera clicking in frantic bursts, her face lit with an almost childish glee. "Jesus, Aiden, look at those rock formations!" she yelled over the wind, pointing her lens at a thin spire jutting into the dawn sky like a witch's finger. "I mean, tell me this doesn't look like a scene out of a fever dream." I forced a thin smile. Her excitement was contagious in its own way, but there was a knot in my gut I couldn't untangle. Lila Monroe, 27, reckless photographer with a laugh like summer rain, had dragged me on more off-the-map shoots than I could count. I was used to her spontaneous trips, but this place, Red Hollow Canyon, wasn't on any official guidebook. I only found it after hours of scrolling through sketchy survival forums and old blog posts by burnt-out desert wanderers. She found it on an old photography subforum titled "Places You Shouldn't Find." Of course she did. By the time we reached the narrow pass between two towering cliffs, the rising sun painted the rocks in deep shades of crimson and purple. The shadows seemed to reach for us, fingers stretching across the dust like something alive. Lila twisted in her seat, eyes glittering. "Isn't it perfect? No tourists, no rangers, no goddamn signs telling you to stay behind the railing." She pointed to a ravine that yawned beside us. "That's the kind of freedom you only get out here, you know." I swallowed hard. Freedom. That word felt heavy, like a promise we weren't meant to keep. We pulled into a narrow clearing nestled between two rock walls, a flat patch of hard-packed sand scattered with sagebrush and sun-bleached bones. The kind of place you'd miss if you blinked twice. We stepped out into the morning, the heat already crawling across my skin like fingers dipped in boiling water. Lila slung her camera over her shoulder and spun in a slow circle, taking it all in. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, strands of red blonde catching the light, and her t-shirt had a faded print of some indie band she swore I'd love, but I never bothered to listen to. "It feels ancient," she said quietly, suddenly reverent. She took a few careful steps forward, sand shifting under her boots. "Like something's been waiting here for centuries." A crow shrieked overhead, startling me so hard I almost dropped my water bottle. Lila laughed and snapped a shot of me mid-flinch. "You okay there, cowboy?" she teased, lowering the camera and squinting at me. I tried to laugh, but my throat was dry as chalk. "Yeah," I lied, "just caught off guard." She turned away, already distracted by a series of strange rock ridges, their jagged shadows cutting into the ground like scars. As I watched her move, so fearless, so determined, I felt that tight knot in my gut twist even harder. There was something wrong with this place. I couldn't say how I knew. Maybe it was the heavy stillness in the air, or the faint tremor in the earth under my feet, as if a massive animal was sleeping deep below. "Lila?" I started, my voice too small against the canyon walls. She didn't hear me. She was already following a shallow path that snaked away from the clearing, deeper into the canyon. Against my better judgment, I followed, my boots scraping on loose shale. The trail opened into a wider basin ringed by blood-red cliffs. In the center, surrounded by a halo of pale desert grass, was a small lake, almost black, almost too still to be real. It looked like an ink stain on a page, Lila stopped dead, camera forgotten at her side. "Holy shit," she whispered. I stepped up beside her and felt my breath stop. The lake was wrong. The air around it felt dense, like it had weight, like it might slide over your skin and slip inside your mouth if you breathed too deep. Lila inched forward, her feet sinking slightly into the damp sand. "Aiden, do you see that?" I followed her gaze. Reflections of the cliffs and sky floated on the surface of the water, but they shimmered strangely. Trees that didn't exist twisted upward, jagged horn-like rocks bent at impossible angles. "Stop," I said sharply, grabbing her wrist. She flinched, startled. I didn't let go. "We don't go closer to that thing," I said, my voice tight. Lila pulled free, frowning at me. "You've been on edge since we left Flagstaff. It's just a lake. We came here to see this, remember?" I shook my head. That's not just a lake." For a moment, she stared at me, really looked at me, and her face softened. She took a small step back, lifting her camera and snapping a quick shot of the water. "All right," she said quietly. "All right, we'll stay back." We stood in silence. A breeze rustled through the dry grass, carrying with it a strange smell, almost sweet, almost rotten. I turned to suggest we head back to the clearing, but Lila was already kneeling in the sand, her camera lens pointed at something half buried near the shore. She brushed the sand away to reveal a small, ornately carved metal box, no bigger than a pack of cigarettes. "Look at this," she breathed, running her thumb over the swirling patterns etched into the surface. I crouched beside her, unease twisting in my chest like a knife. The carvings seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them, reshaping themselves into shapes my mind refused to hold on to. "Lila?" "Put it down," I said. She glanced up at me, her eyes shining with excitement. "You know I can't do that." She found a tiny latch on the side and flicked it open with a soft click. Inside, folded so precisely it looked machine-made, was a strip of brittle yellowed parchment. She unfolded it carefully. I leaned over her shoulder, reading the jagged, cramped handwriting. "To all who enter Red Hollow Canyon, do not leave your shelter after sunset. Do not touch the black water. Do not answer when your name is called unless you see the one who calls you. Leave an offering beneath the split stone before you sleep. If the mist comes, count each breath and stop only when it retreats." My throat went dry. "This is some local prank," Lila said, but her voice trembled. She held up her camera as if to hide behind it. I didn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the parchment, on the final words scribbled in smaller, shaky letters. "These rules keep you safe. I'm sorry I didn't follow them." A single drop of sweat crawled down my spine. Lila closed the box slowly, her hands suddenly unsteady. We stood facing the lake. The reflection still moved, twisting, bending, mocking us. I took a deep breath and looked at her, really looked. There was a fine tremor in her lower lip, a crack in her brave facade. "We should set up camp," I said, the words heavy in my mouth. She nodded once, her fingers flexing anxiously around her camera strap. I could hear my own pulse roaring in my ears as we walked back toward the clearing. Above us, a raven wheeled in the sky, calling out once, sharp and echoing between the canyon walls. The sound made my skin crawl. I knew, deep down, that we had already crossed a threshold we wouldn't come back from. We were no longer visitors. We were being watched, and Red Hollow Canyon was waiting for us to break the first rule. We set up camp under the watchful eyes of 1,000 sandstone faces. As the sun climbed higher, the air shimmered like a living mirage. Even in the shade, I felt the heat crawl along my skin, slithering up my spine and settling somewhere deep in my skull. Lila moved with an almost mechanical focus, pitching the small dome tent she insisted was perfect for desert nights. She hammered the stakes into the hard-packed sand, her knuckles white, her breaths short and sharp. I tried to help, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I glanced back toward that ink-black lake, I saw shadows shifting just beneath its surface, as though something down there was circling, watching. "Pass me the fly," Lila snapped, breaking me out of my trance. I fumbled with the rolled-up sheet of nylon and tossed it to her, missing by a good foot. She scowled, grabbed it off the sand, and kept working without looking at me. She wasn't angry, not really. She was terrified, and this was her way of keeping her mind occupied. I knew it, because I felt the same knot of dread curling tight in my own chest. After the tent was finally standing, she sat cross-legged on a flat stone, scrolling through the shots she had taken. I sank down beside her, taking a long swig from my canteen. My throat was so dry it felt like I'd swallowed glass. "Let me see," I said, nodding at her camera. She hesitated, then handed it over. I clicked through the photos. The canyon at dawn, majestic, almost holy. The red cliffs melting into gold as the sun rose. Then the lake, the reflection of twisted trees that didn't exist. I stopped on one frame, my breath hitched. "What the hell?" I whispered. In the image, I was standing beside the lake, my face turned toward Lila's camera, but my reflection in the water? It wasn't looking at her. It wasn't even looking at me. It stared straight at the camera, its mouth curled in a grotesque grin, eyes wide and empty. "Lila," I croaked, "look at this." She leaned in, peered at the tiny screen, and let out a strangled laugh that died in her throat. "That's just some digital glitch," she stammered. "Lens flare or something." But she didn't sound convinced. I scrolled back and forth, but the reflection stayed the same. I felt my stomach twist into a cold, wet knot. I handed her the camera. She held it for a moment, then turned it off and let it rest in her lap, staring at the sand. The wind picked up then. Hot, dry, but somehow carrying a sharp edge. It rustled the few scraggly bushes, made the nylon tent walls snap and sigh. Lila wiped sweat from her forehead and tied her hair up higher. She glanced at me, eyes glimmering with a mix of fear and defiance. "We should do it," she said. "Do what?" My voice sounded foreign to me, thin and hollow. "The offering," she replied. "The rules. From that paper. Maybe it's bullshit, but maybe it's not." I didn't want to agree, but the thought of that twisted reflection, the smile that didn't belong to me, rooted my feet to the ground. "What would you offer?" I asked, though I already knew. Lila pulled off a delicate silver ring from her right hand. It was thin, worn smooth at the edges, the small turquoise stone set in a simple claw mount. "My grandma gave this to my mom," she said, her voice cracking a little, "and my mom gave it to me before she swallowed hard. Before she left." I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against cool metal. My grandfather's old pocket watch, the one my dad gave me the day he died. A stupid tradition that meant everything and nothing at the same time. I turned it over in my palm, staring at the scratched back engraved with my initials. I didn't want to let it go. I felt like if I did, I might lose myself, like that final thread tying me to something real would snap. Lila put her hand over mine, squeezing gently. "We don't have to understand it," she said, her voice low and steady. "We just have to survive." I nodded, even though every part of me screamed in protest. Together, we walked to a massive split boulder sitting halfway between our camp and the lake. Its sides gaped open like a giant's jaw, lined with veins of quartz that shimmered under the sun. We knelt together, placing our offerings inside the dark crevice at its heart. Lila's ring glinted faintly as it disappeared into the shadow. I let the watch drop last, listening to it rattle against the stone before coming to rest. A breeze slithered past, making my skin crawl. I looked up, squinting toward the lake. The water looked even darker now, like a wound in the earth. Lila stood and took my hand. "We did it," she whispered, as if saying it out loud might make it true. We trudged back to the camp, the air feeling thicker with every step. Once inside the tent, Lila curled up against the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. I sat opposite her, staring at the thin, almost translucent tent fabric. Outside, the world was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no bugs, not even the whisper of wind. After what felt like hours, Lila finally spoke. "Do you think they work?" she asked, her voice so small I almost didn't hear it. "The rules?" I asked back. She nodded. I thought of the note at the end of the parchment. Those last trembling words. I'm sorry I didn't follow them. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I think if they didn't work, they wouldn't bother leaving them behind." She shivered and reached for her camera, flipping through the shots again like a child clutching a favorite stuffed toy. Her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped it. I crawled over and sat next to her, my back against the tent wall. The heat inside was suffocating, the air stale and laced with the sour smell of sweat. I could feel her shaking beside me, her breaths shallow and fast. "Hey," I said softly, "look at me." She turned, her eyes glassy, her lips quivering. "We're gonna be okay," I lied. "We'll get out of this, you and me." She let out a fragile laugh and pressed her forehead against my chest. "You suck at lying," she whispered. I held her tighter, burying my face in her hair, inhaling the scent of dust and sunscreen. We stayed like that for a long time, listening to our mingled heartbeats thudding against the silence. Then, somewhere outside the tent, a sharp sound echoed, a single distant clink, like metal tapping stone. Lila jolted upright, eyes wide. "What was that?" I strained my ears, heart hammering against my ribs. The sound came again, closer this time, a scrape like nails dragging across a rock face. I pulled Lila down beside me and pressed a finger to my lips. We sat in the heavy dark, listening. The scraping grew louder, moving along the outside of the tent. I could see a faint, shifting shadow on the fabric. Something was circling us. Lila clutched my hand so tightly it hurt. The shadow paused by the tent door. We heard a low, rasping breath, so close I felt it in my own lungs. Then a voice, low, hoarse, almost familiar. "Aiden." Lila squeezed my hand harder, shaking her head violently. The voice came again, more insistent. "Aiden, help me, please." I felt my mouth go dry, my muscles twitching to move. That voice, it sounded like my father's. Broken, weak, like the last days in the hospital. But the rules said not to answer unless you could see who was calling. I pressed my forehead to Lila's and shut my eyes, fighting the urge to crawl out and throw open the tent. Outside, the voice turned pleading, then furious, then animalistic. The scratching turned into pounding, like fists against the earth. Lila sobbed into my shoulder, her tears hot against my neck. I held her close, my own breath coming in ragged gasps. Minutes felt like centuries. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the pounding stopped. Silence poured back in, so complete it felt unnatural. We didn't move, we didn't breathe. We waited for the sun to find us again. And in that suffocating dark, pressed against Lila's trembling body, I realized something horrible. The real horror wasn't that the canyon was haunted. It was that it wanted us to play along. And we already had. When I finally opened my eyes, the first pale light of dawn was slicing through the thin tent fabric like a scalpel. I lay still for a long time, listening. No scratching, no voices, no rasping breath clawing at the edges of my sanity. Just a tense, fragile silence. Lila was still curled up beside me, her arm draped across my chest, her hand gripping a fistful of my shirt like a child terrified of losing her last anchor. Her breathing was deep, but shaky, the aftershock of a nightmare that hadn't ended when we woke. I slowly shifted, careful not to wake her, and crawled to the tent flap. I hesitated, my fingers trembling on the zipper. Part of me screamed to stay inside, to obey the first rule. Don't leave your shelter before sunrise, but the sun was up now, at least enough to paint the canyon walls in ghostly pink. I drew a slow breath and unzipped the flap. Outside, the world looked normal. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue. The sand shimmered faintly in the rising heat. But even in that early morning quiet, something felt different, like the air had been stripped of its soul. I stepped out, my boots sinking into the cool sand. The lake still lay there, silent and black, reflecting the cliffs above. In that moment, it looked like a perfect mirror, an illusion of tranquility that dared me to get closer. I didn't. Instead, I turned toward the split stone where we'd left our offering. A chill rolled through me as I realized the rock looked different, darker somehow, as if something inside it had woken up and was watching. I crept closer. My grandfather's pocket watch sat atop the rock, gleaming wetly in the morning light. Next to it, Lila's silver ring was perched upright on the stone, the turquoise gleaming like an open eye. They had been returned. I felt bile rise in my throat. I wanted to believe it was some sick prank, a coyote or raven playing tricks, but deep down I knew the canyon had rejected our offerings. Or worse, it had accepted them and decided we were worth more. Behind me, I heard the tent rustle. I turned to see Lila stumble out, her hair wild, her eyes bloodshot. She scanned the clearing, then froze when she saw the stone. She walked up beside me, her lips parting in a silent scream as she stared at the returned items. No, she whispered, snatching her ring from the rock. She held it in her palm, her fingers trembling so violently I thought she'd drop it again. I reached for my watch, but my hand stopped inches above it. I couldn't bear to touch it. It looked wrong now, tainted. "We have to leave," Lila said suddenly, turning to me with wild eyes. "Aiden, we have to get out now, please." I nodded. I didn't need convincing. We threw everything into our packs in a frenzy. Tent poles bent and jammed in at awkward angles, food barely shoved into pouch. Lila dropped her camera twice, each time scrambling to pick it up like it was the last piece of her identity. The moment we shouldered our packs, we sprinted. We didn't speak. We didn't look back. The desert felt endless, every echo of our footfalls bouncing off the canyon walls like mocking laughter. After what felt like an hour of stumbling through gullies and scrambling up rock faces, we paused at a narrow ridge to catch our breath. Lila bent over, hands on her knees, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Sweat dripped from her chin onto the sand. She looked up at me, her eyes glazed and hollow. "Where the hell are we?" I glanced around, my own panic clawing at the edges of my mind. The landmarks were all wrong. The ridges looked taller, closer together. The familiar split boulder and the narrow pass we had driven through were gone, replaced by a sea of jagged red spires. "We came in through there," I said, pointing vaguely toward a canyon mouth that no longer looked familiar. My voice sounded desperate, pathetic. "No," Lila snapped. "We came in that way." She spun, jabbing her finger toward a different gorge, her voice cracking. We argued for a few seconds, no, minutes maybe. Time had become a strange, syrupy thing out here. Finally, Lila dropped to the ground, clutching her head. "This isn't possible," she sobbed. "It's a fucking desert. You can't just move mountains overnight." I knelt beside her, my own breath shaking. I wanted to tell her it was okay, that we'd figure it out, but the words felt empty, like dry leaves in my mouth. We sat there for what felt like forever, until I noticed something half buried in the sand between us. A box. Another box, just like the first one we'd found. I picked it up carefully, my fingers tracing the shifting carvings that slithered under my touch. Lila stared at it, her eyes wide with horror. I opened the lid, inside another parchment. The same tight spidery handwriting, but different words. "If the sun rises and no birds sing, seek a hollow stone and hide inside until they call again. If you see blood on your skin, copy the pattern before washing it away. Do not try to match reflections. They show what was, not what is." I felt my pulse explode in my ears. Lila's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Suddenly, she let out a strangled scream, pointing at my arm. I looked down. A long, jagged streak of crimson ran down my forearm. It wasn't a cut. There was no pain, no torn skin. The blood just appeared, like it had been painted on me by an invisible hand. Lila grabbed my wrist, her hands slick with sweat. She fumbled for her sketchbook, tearing it from her pack and flipping it open with frantic energy. Hold still, she shouted, her voice raw. She drew as fast as she could, copying the strange curling pattern of the blood. Her pencil snapped twice, and each time she threw it aside, digging for another one in her pack. When she finished, she dropped the book and stared at me, her chest heaving. I looked at my arm again. The blood had already started to dry, flaking off in dark, brittle patches. We sat there, stunned, our world collapsing around us one rule at a time. A sudden gust of wind screamed down the canyon, whipping sand into our faces. I squeezed my eyes shut, my arm shielding my head. When it passed, I looked up and saw Lila standing, clutching her camera like a weapon. Her eyes met mine, wild, fierce, terrible. "Not dying out here," she hissed. "Not today." I forced myself to my feet, every muscle screaming in protest. I looked back over my shoulder. The lake wasn't visible from here, but somehow I could still feel it. A cold, liquid presence in the back of my mind, calling. The rules weren't just warnings, they were commands, and breaking them felt like pulling the pin on a grenade that was already in our hands. Lila grabbed my arm and pulled me forward. "We keep moving," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "We follow the rules, we survive." And even though the desert seemed to twist and warp around us, even though my skin crawled with invisible eyes, I followed her, because in that moment, it was either obey the impossible or die screaming in the sand. We stumbled forward, deeper into the canyon's labyrinth of red stone and crooked shadows. The morning light had shifted into a harsh white glare that turned every rock into a blade and every crevice into a gaping mouth. Lila led the way, her camera bouncing against her chest with each desperate step. The sketchbook with my copied blood pattern was tucked under her arm like a sacred text, her fingers gripping it so tightly her knuckles looked bleached. I dragged behind her, my legs heavy as cement. My mind replayed the crimson pattern on my arm over and over. I felt like it was still there, burning beneath my skin, a brand that marked me for something I couldn't name. We crested a low ridge and nearly tumbled into a shallow ravine on the other side. Lila stopped so suddenly that I slammed into her back, knocking the breath out of both of us. She raised a trembling hand and pointed. Below us, a narrow pool of water shimmered in the sand, a mirror-like oasis, hidden among jutting stones. At first, it looked almost welcoming, a promise of relief in the crushing heat. But then I saw it. The reflections. The pool didn't show the sky above, or the red cliffs around it. Instead, it held a distorted image, a warped copy of the world. Trees that didn't exist twisted toward an invisible sun. And somewhere in that twisted mirage stood two figures. Lila's reflection stood perfectly still, facing each other. But in the pool, my doppelganger was leaning close to Lila's reflection, whispering something into her ear. Lila's reflection didn't move or flinch. It just smiled. "Fuck," I breathed, stumbling backward. Lila turned to me, her eyes wide with horror, sweat dripping from her chin. Don't look at it," she stammered, her voice cracking. "The rules, they said not to match the reflections." I tore my gaze away, my stomach twisting into knots. The echoes of that rule rang in my skull like a siren. Do not try to match reflections. They show what was, not what is. Lila covered her face with her hands, taking deep, gulping breaths. Her shoulders shook as if she might collapse at any second. I grabbed her arm, my grip firm but careful. "Come on, we have to keep moving. We need to find a hollow stone, or get the hell away from this thing." She nodded, but her feet wouldn't move. Her eyes flicked toward the pool again, drawn like a moth to a flame. "Lila," I snapped, shaking her. "Don't look." She gasped and wrenched her gaze away, pressing her forehead against my chest. I saw us," she whispered, "but not us. It was like we were puppets, like something was inside us, moving us around." My skin crawled. I felt it too, some deep, parasitic cold that seemed to crawl up my spine whenever I thought about that reflection. I forced her to turn away, and together we slid down the ridge, skirting the pool's edge without looking. The air felt heavier down here, as if the ground itself was exhaling something rotten and ancient. We picked a narrow path between two sharp rock walls, moving like two wounded animals, every sound, every pebble skittering underfoot, every gust of hot wind made my heart slam against my ribs. Suddenly, Lila stumbled and nearly went face first into the sand. I caught her just in time, but she let out a strangled sob and collapsed to her knees, her shoulders shaking violently. I can't do this," she choked out. "It's too much. I just wanted to take photos. I didn't sign up for this fucking nightmare." I knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders. My own fear twisted in my chest like barbed wire, but I forced it down. I couldn't let her see me break too. "Look at me," I said, my voice low and hard. "You think I wanted this? You think I don't want to run and hide and pretend this isn't happening?" She raised her head slowly, her tear-streaked face painted with dust and sunburn. I cupped her face in my hands. "But we're here now. We can't wish it away. We follow the rules. We stay alive together." Her lips trembled. She nodded once. "Together?" she echoed. A sudden metallic clang rang out behind us, echoing off the canyon walls. We both snapped our heads around. There, standing at the far end of the narrow pass, was a man. Tall, gaunt, dressed in filthy hiking gear that looked like it had been clawed apart by wild animals. His face was half hidden by a sun-bleached scarf, but I could see his eyes, wide, bloodshot, and glittering with something that wasn't quite human. He lifted one shaky hand, palm out. "Don't run," he rasped, his voice like sandpaper dragged across bone. "If you run, they'll hear." Lila scrambled backward, clutching my arm. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my throat raw. The man staggered forward a step, his boots crunching on the sand. "My name?" "Jonas," he croaked. "I've been here so long, years, maybe decades." I glanced at Lila. She shook her head furiously, her grip tightening on my wrist. Jonas kept moving, his shoulders jerking with each step like a marionette on tangled strings. "They chose you," he said, pointing a trembling finger at me. "They always choose one. One to hold the gate open, one to be the vessel." My vision darkened at the edges. Lila clutched my shirt, her breaths turning into short, panicked gasps. Jonas stumbled to a stop a few feet away. Up close, I saw the crusted blood caked around his fingernails, the ragged tears in his clothes that revealed pale, sunburned skin stretched too tight over bone. He reached into a pocket and fumbled out a small, stone object, a key-shaped talisman, carved with spiraling runes that seemed to crawl when I tried to focus on them. "This," he wheezed, thrusting it toward me, "this is your only chance to stop them. You have to lock the altar at the lake before midnight." I didn't move. My arms felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. Lila stepped forward, trembling, and snatched the stone from his hand. "Why us?" she demanded, her voice cracking like shattered glass. "Why not you?" Jonas laughed, a sound so dry and empty it made my teeth ache. "They already marked me," he said, tapping a deep scar that zigzagged across his forearm. "I failed my turn. I was too weak." His eyes darted to me again, and I saw something else there, something almost hungry. You still have a chance," he hissed. "But they're coming. The reflections, the voices, they're just the beginning." A shiver tore through me. Lila pressed the stone into my palm, her eyes wide and terrified. Jonas straightened abruptly, as though yanked by an invisible string. His head twisted sharply, and he let out a gurgling gasp. "They're close," he croaked. "The ground is listening. The air is listening." Without another word, he turned and bolted into the canyon's shadows, moving with an inhuman, lurching speed. We stood frozen, our bodies buzzing with electric terror. The canyon had fallen silent again, the kind of silence that feels like standing on the edge of a scream. I looked down at the stone key in my hand, the runes crawling like insects across its surface. Lila grabbed my arm, her nails biting into my skin. "Aiden, what do we do?" I looked into her eyes, my own voice a hoarse whisper. "We follow the rules. And we pray. They're enough." We stood there in that trembling silence, the stone key heavy and alive in my hand. Lila's fingers clutched my forearm so hard that I felt her nails cut into my skin. Neither of us spoke. We just listened. To the wind that sounded like distant whispering, to the shifting grit under our boots that echoed too loudly in that canyon throat. I forced myself to look at the talisman again. Its runes writhed in the corners of my vision, shapes my mind refused to hold. My gut twisted with the certainty that this thing was not meant to be held by human hands. Lila's breath hitched beside me. She turned, her eyes darting around the canyon walls as if expecting them to close in at any moment. "We need to go," she whispered, voice so hoarse it barely carried past her lips. "We need to find that altar." I nodded, my throat too dry to form words. We started moving again, every step hesitant, like stepping onto a frozen lake we knew would crack. The canyon walls shifted subtly around us, the shadows seeming to creep and reach for us. At times I felt hands brushing the back of my neck, just beyond reach, an impossible sensation that nearly buckled my knees. Lila stopped suddenly, dropping to her knees in the sand. She fumbled open her pack and ripped out her sketchbook. The page with my blood pattern had begun to curl and darken at the edges, as if burned by an invisible flame. She traced the lines again and again, her hands shaking so badly that the pencil snapped. She dug out another one, drawing deeper, harder. I knelt next to her, trying to steady her wrists. "You're okay," I lied, my voice a hushed croak. "It's okay. We've got this. We just have to finish." A sound cut me off. From the ridge above us came a wet, dragging scrape. We both froze. A shape shifted at the edge of the cliff, tall, angular, moving wrong, like a marionette with tangled strings. It paused, tilting its head toward us. Then it began to descend, slipping between rock cracks and ledges in jagged, impossibly fluid movements. Lila snapped her sketchbook shut, her eyes wide and wild. She shoved it into her pack and grabbed my arm, hauling me up with surprising strength. "Move!" she screamed. We ran. We stumbled down a narrow slot canyon, the walls pressing in so tightly my shoulders scraped raw against the stone. Every echo of our footfalls bounced back at us, magnified, multiplied, as if we were being chased by an entire stampede of shadows. A sudden sharp corner forced us to slow, and we burst into a wide open basin surrounded by blood-red cliffs. My breath caught in my throat. There, at the center of the basin, stood a stone altar, or what passed for one. It was a crude platform of jagged rocks, splattered with what looked like old, dried blood, dark and crusted. Faint runic carvings spiraled out from its base, crawling into the sand like veins. The lake shimmered beyond it, its surface glassy and still, a pitch-black eye that refused to blink. I felt the stone key throb in my palm. A low thrumming sound echoed deep in my skull, like the heartbeat of something massive beneath the earth. Lila doubled over beside me, dry heaving into the sand. Her entire body trembled violently. I crouched down and put a hand on her back, but she jerked away. "They're in my head," she gasped, clawing at her temples. They're showing me things. Versions of us. Aiden, it's all wrong. They're all wrong." I swallowed the acid rising in my throat and forced myself to my feet. "We have to finish this," I said, though I didn't believe it. "We have to lock it before midnight." She looked up at me, her face pale as bone, her eyes sunken with terror. But she nodded. We stepped forward together, each footfall vibrating up my spine. As we got closer to the altar, I saw symbols etched into the stone, some in deep, clean cuts, others as if clawed by frantic hands. I reached the altar first. My fingers hovered above it, the key burning against my skin. Suddenly, a new sound filled the basin, a chorus of whispers, rising and falling in waves, an ocean of broken voices echoing off the cliffs. The words were fragmented, spoken in languages I didn't recognize. But beneath them, one voice rose above the others, my father's voice. "Aiden," it crooned. "Please, help me. I'm trapped. I need you." My hand faltered. A cold wind whipped around us, carrying the scent of rotting flowers. Lila staggered forward, grabbing my wrist. "Don't listen," she shrieked, her eyes wild. "It's not him. It's them." I turned to her, my vision swimming. Her face melted in and out of focus, sometimes looking like her, sometimes a twisted mimic. My legs buckled and I slammed against the altar. I saw my reflection in the smooth obsidian-like surface, my face, but smiling too wide, eyes too dark. It leaned closer, mirroring my movements exactly, but with a sickening, exaggerated grace. Lila slapped me across the face, the crack echoing like a gunshot. "Focus!" she screamed. I sucked in a breath so sharp it felt like knives in my lungs. I gripped the key tighter, forcing my hand forward inch by inch. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Jonas, staggering toward us across the basin, his gait disjointed, puppet-like. His eyes gleamed with a terrible hunger. "No," he screeched. "You can't close it. You have to finish the cycle. You have to give yourself." I felt Lila's fingers tighten on my arm as Jonas lunged. She shoved me aside, stepping between us and raising her sketchbook like a shield. Jonas collided with her, knocking her backward. She hit the sand, hard, the air exploding from her lungs. The sketchbook flew from her hands, pages scattering like frightened birds. I watched in horror as Jonas crawled toward her, clawing at her shoulders, his fingers curling into hooks. "Give it to me," he howled. "I can go home. I can leave this place." A scream ripped from my throat as I surged forward, driving the key into the center of the altar with all my strength. A thunderous boom cracked through the air, splitting the sky. The runes on the altar flared with a blinding white light, and the ground quaked beneath us. Jonas shrieked, his body convulsing as black veins spread across his skin, crawling into his eyes and mouth. He clawed at his face, his voice breaking into a dozen overlapping echoes. Lila scrambled back, tears and sweat mixing on her dirt-streaked face. I reached for her, pulling her to her feet. The lake behind us began to churn violently, great waves of ink-like water smashing against the shore. The reflections shattered, splintering into a million warped fragments that scattered into the air like shards of glass. Lila grabbed my shirt, her fingers digging into my chest. "Aiden, it's closing," she sobbed. "We have to move." I pulled her into my arms, her heartbeat hammering against mine. We turned to flee, the altar behind us screeching like a wounded animal as it collapsed inward, dragging Jonas's writhing body into a black vortex that opened beneath it. Sand and dust spiraled around us, the wind shrieking with voices that sounded like every nightmare I'd ever had. We ran. We didn't look back. We ran until our legs felt like they might snap. Every breath scorched my lungs. Each heartbeat thudded in my ears like the pounding of war drums. The canyon around us blurred into streaks of red and shadow, and the sky above twisted with roiling clouds that looked more like black smoke than weather. Behind us, a deep roar rolled across the basin, vibrating up my spine and rattling my teeth. It sounded like the earth itself was tearing apart. Lila clung to my hand, her grip so tight it felt like she might rip my arm from its socket. Sand whipped into our faces, cutting our cheeks, filling our mouths with grit and the metallic tang of blood. A sudden gust nearly knocked her off her feet. I grabbed her waist, pulling her back to me. She looked up, eyes wild, tears mixing with blood and dust on her face. "We have to keep going," she screamed over the wind. I nodded, though the thought of taking another step felt impossible. My legs were jelly, my lungs shriveled and burning. But when I looked at her, at the pure, primal terror carved into her face, I knew we didn't have a choice. We stumbled forward, following a narrow crevice that curved and twisted like a dying serpent. The walls pulsed with unnatural shadows that writhed and reached, fingers of darkness brushing against our shoulders as if guiding us deeper. The path finally spilled us out into another clearing, smaller and choked with jagged boulders. At the far side, a narrow slit in the rock shimmered faintly, an exit, or at least the promise of one. Lila doubled over, gagging and spitting sand. I grabbed her shoulders, shaking her gently. "Lila, look at me!" I shouted. She lifted her head, her pupils blown wide, face pale beneath the streaks of red. "We're close," I lied. "That's our way out, you see it?" She nodded shakily, her lips moving silently as if praying. We staggered toward the slit, the canyon walls humming with an electric energy that made every hair on my arm stand up. Halfway across the clearing, a sound stopped us cold. A chorus of whispers that melted together into something worse than words. They weren't in English or any human tongue, but I understood them all the same. A message carried on 1,000 voices burrowing into my bones. You were chosen. You were marked. You cannot leave. Lila screamed, clutching her ears. She fell to her knees, sobbing and convulsing. I dropped beside her, wrapping my arms around her shaking body. A sudden flash of movement at the edge of my vision made me jerk around. Shadows spilled from the rocks, growing taller and thicker until they resembled twisted, half-formed human shapes. Their heads lolled, jaws distending in silent screams. Their arms reached for us, impossibly long, fingers ending in shards of jagged bone. I felt my bladder threaten to give out. My entire body turned to ice, my heart stuttering in my chest. Lila's head snapped up, her eyes rolling. "Aiden, they're inside me," she rasped, spitting blood. I grabbed her face, forcing her to focus on me. "No, listen to me. They're lies. It's all lies. You are here, with me, right now," she sobbed, her eyes flickering wildly between lucidity and void. Her nails dug into my forearms, deep enough to draw blood. The shadows crept closer, circling us in a tightening noose. Their whispers grew louder, warping into echoing moans. One of them stepped forward, its neck bent at an impossible angle, its face stretched into a horrific grin that mirrored mine from the lake. Lila let out a guttural shriek and lunged toward the slit in the rock. I scrambled to my feet and chased after her, nearly tripping over my own legs. She squeezed into the gap first, her shoulders scraping violently against the rock. Blood smeared the walls as she forced herself through, sobs echoing in the narrow space. I followed, feeling the shadows rake at my back, cold as a morgue slab. I screamed as stone tore into my skin, each scrape feeling like a hot iron dragged across my flesh. At last, I fell through the other side, landing hard on my hands and knees. I looked up, blinking dust and blood from my eyes. We had emerged into a wide ledge overlooking a sheer drop. Beyond it stretched a different part of the canyon, somehow brighter, quieter. I could see distant cliffs bathed in pale golden light, an almost normal desert landscape. Lila crawled to the edge, looking down with wild, desperate eyes. "There!" she choked out, pointing to a thin, winding trail that zigzagged down into the open canyon below. "That's it! That has to be it!" I crawled beside her, grabbing her hand. "We go together," I said, my voice low, trembling. "No matter what." She nodded, her lips trembling. Together we stood, teetering on the brink. Suddenly a loud crack split the air behind us. We spun around. The shadows had forced themselves into the narrow gap we had just escaped, pouring out like a flood of black oil. Their forms twisted and collapsed into each other, reshaping into something bigger, a towering mass of writhing limbs and empty faces. It moved toward us, the rock beneath it sizzling and blackening with each touch. I turned back to Lila. "Run!" I roared, shoving her forward. We bolted down the narrow trail, rocks tumbling away under our feet. I could feel the monstrous heat of that thing behind me, hear its chorus of voices crawling into my mind, gnawing at my resolve. Halfway down, Lila stumbled, nearly pitching over the edge. I lunged, catching her wrist just in time. Our eyes locked, hers wild, my own wide with panic. I pulled her back onto the trail, her body convulsed against mine, and she let out a strangled sob. "Don't let go!" she shrieked. "I won't!" I yelled back. "I won't ever!" We scrambled down the final switchback, finally landing on solid sand at the canyon floor. I looked up. The monstrous shape at the ledge above seethed and roared, its limbs writhing in fury. It didn't descend. It stayed there, like an angry god behind a prison wall. Lila collapsed against me, her entire body shaking. I wrapped my arms around her, burying my face in her hair. Above, the sun finally broke through the swirling clouds, casting pale gold across the desert floor. For the first time in what felt like centuries, I felt the warmth of real sunlight on my skin. Lila sobbed against my chest. "Is it over?" she croaked. I looked up at the black howling shape clawing at the canyon rim. "No," I whispered, my voice breaking. "But we're still here, and we're still together." In that fragile morning light, covered in blood and sand, we clung to each other. The desert watched, and for now it let us live. We stood there, both of us panting, our bodies half broken and trembling. The sunlight felt unreal, like a painted backdrop that might peel away any second. Lila collapsed to her knees, pressing her forehead into the sand. Her back shook with dry, silent sobs. I sank beside her, my legs finally giving out. I felt the sun on my skin, but still shivered as if wrapped in a shroud of ice. For a long time, we didn't speak. The only sounds were the hush of the wind and the echo of that thing's roar, still ringing in my skull like a church bell tolling for the dead. Finally, Lila looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face streaked with blood and tears. I don't know if I can do this anymore," she whispered, her voice as brittle as old paper. I swallowed hard. My throat felt torn open from all the screaming. "Lila," I rasped, reaching for her hand. "I don't know how much further we have to go, but I need you. We need each other. You hear me?" She nodded, a single, slow motion, but her gaze drifted over my shoulder. Her expression changed, sharpened into something wary and desperate all at once. I turned to follow her stare. There, about 50 feet away, a low stone structure jutted from the sand, almost completely swallowed by drifting dunes. It looked like a giant boulder at first glance, but as I squinted, I saw a narrow slit, an entrance, a hollow stone. The rule came crashing into my head, tearing through my exhausted mind like lightning. If the sun rises and no birds sing, seek a hollow stone and hide inside until they call again. I strained my ears. No birds, no calls, just silence thick enough to choke on. I looked back at Lila. Her expression shifted from disbelief to raw terror as she realized the same thing. "We have to go," I said, forcing my knees to lock. "Now." She didn't argue. She clawed her way up, her legs trembling so violently she nearly fell again. I looped an arm under her shoulder, half dragging her as we staggered toward the hollow stone. The desert around us felt like it was holding its breath. Each footstep sounded like a gunshot. I could almost feel eyes, millions of them, pressing into my back, crawling along my neck. When we reached the entrance, I hesitated. It looked impossibly narrow, like a crack in the earth that might slam shut the moment we squeezed inside. Layla didn't wait. She dropped to her knees and crawled forward, her fingers scrabbling at the rough stone. Her backpack snagged on the entrance, tearing. Pages of her sketchbook spilled out, whipping away into the sand like startled birds. "Lila!" I shouted, but she didn't stop. She forced herself deeper, disappearing into the blackness. I dropped to the ground and shoved my bag aside, forcing my body through the narrow gap. The stone scraped my ribs and hips, each movement sending sparks of pain up my spine. The air inside was stifling, thick with the smell of old dust and something sweeter, almost rotten. I emerged into a cramped cavern barely large enough for us to crouch. Lila was curled up against the far wall, rocking slightly. Her fingers dug into her scalp. I crawled toward her, ignoring the pain that flared with every movement. When I reached her, I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her trembling body against mine. She pressed her face into my chest, her sobs muffled and broken. "They're outside," she whispered. "I can feel them, pressing on the stone, listening." I didn't dare answer. Instead, I focused on my breathing, counting each ragged inhale and exhale in my head. Outside, the world shifted. The soft hush of wind turned into something else, an unearthly hum that rose and fell like a distant chant. I closed my eyes, imagining the canyon floor crawling with those shadows, slipping through cracks, sniffing for us like starving wolves. Lila jerked in my arms. Her eyes flew open, wild and empty. "They're trying to pull me out." she gasped, her voice rising to a shriek. "Aiden, don't let them take me." I tightened my grip until my muscles screamed. "I'm here," I said over and over like a prayer. "I've got you. I'm here." The humming outside rose into a crescendo, so loud I thought my eardrums might burst. I pressed my forehead to hers, trying to anchor her in that tiny pocket of reality we still shared. "Door!" Suddenly a sharp crack echoed through the cavern, followed by a hiss, like steam escaping a broken pipe. Lila shrieked and clawed at my chest, her nails drawing blood. A hairline fracture split the stone above us, snaking down the wall with a sound like splitting bone. A thin sliver of gray light spilled inside, flickering like a dying candle flame. I pressed her head to my chest, shielding her from the light. "Close your eyes," I roared. "Don't look. Don't listen," she sobbed into my shirt, her entire body convulsing with each breath. I felt her heart hammer against my ribs, as frantic as my own. The fracture widened, and a thin, cold wind poured into the cavern. The hum turned into a chorus of voices, hundreds, maybe thousands, all calling our names in a grotesque harmony. My father's voice, my mother's, friends long dead, strangers I'd never met but somehow recognized in my bones. I bit down on my tongue until I tasted copper, anything to keep my mind anchored to the pain instead of those voices. Lila let out a low, keening wail. They're inside my head," she moaned. I grabbed her face, forcing her eyes to stay shut. "Count your breaths," I hissed, just like the rules. "Count." Her lips moved. 1, 2, 3. The voices roared, shaking the stone walls, but I clung to her, repeating the count with her. 4, 5, 6. The crack above us splintered further, and I felt the hollow stone shudder as if it might collapse at any moment. 7, 8, 9. Then, silence. The wind stopped. The chanting cut off like a severed wire. We lay there, panting in the thick, unmoving air. I felt her fingers twitch against my neck, then relax, her breath slowing into a ragged but steady rhythm. I opened my eyes, terrified of what I might see, but the crack had sealed itself again. The faint light was gone. The hollow stone was whole once more. I swallowed hard, tasting blood and dust. I pressed my lips to her forehead. "We made it," I whispered, my voice nothing but a thread. She shivered against me, her tears hot on my skin. "For now," she breathed. In the pitch black of that hollow stone, we held each other as the sun rose above the canyon, unseen but alive. We had obeyed the rules, and somehow we were still here. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time inside that hollow stone felt like trying to hold water in my hands, always slipping, always impossible to measure. Lila eventually fell into a fitful sleep against my chest, her breathing uneven and ragged. Every so often she twitched violently, her fingers curling like she was grabbing at something only she could see. I stayed awake, my eyes wide open in the darkness. Every sound beyond the stone, every creak, every shifting grain of sand felt amplified, as if the whole canyon had its ear pressed against our hiding place. When Lila finally stirred, her eyelids fluttering like moth wings, she looked up at me, dazed and hollow-eyed. "Are they gone?" she croaked, her voice rasping like broken glass. I swallowed hard. "I don't know," I said, "but we can't stay here forever." She nodded weakly. I felt her body tighten with resolve, a faint flicker of the fierce spirit that had first pulled me into this desert nightmare. I helped her sit up. Every joint in my body screamed in protest. My back felt like it had been broken and stitched back together with barbed wire. We crawled toward the narrow slit of the entrance. I paused at the threshold, my heart hammering so loud it seemed to echo in the stone walls. Then, slowly, I peeked outside. The canyon looked different. The sky above was an unnatural shade of pale orange. The sun a bloated, distorted shape like a dying eye. The rock walls seemed taller, warped, leaning in toward us as though listening. A sudden rush of nausea rolled through me. I forced it down and turned back to Lila. "It's different out there," I whispered. She swallowed, her jaw clenched tight. "Different is better than dead," she said, her voice small but steady. Together we crawled out into the open. The air was stifling, thick and electric, every breath like inhaling static. Our footsteps felt muffled as though the sand had turned into some dense, alien material. As we moved, the canyon twisted around us. We would take 10 steps forward and find ourselves facing a wall that hadn't been there before. We would turn to retrace our path and find it gone, swallowed into a maze of shifting stone. Lila pressed closer to me with every turn, her eyes darting in every direction. "It's like it's rebuilding itself," she gasped. "It doesn't want us to leave." I tried to focus on the sound of her breath, the warmth of her shoulder against mine. "Just keep moving," I muttered, more to myself than her. At one point, we rounded a narrow bend and found a stretch of ground covered in strange markings, spirals, jagged lines, symbols that crawled across the sand like living things. Lila bent down, her trembling fingers tracing the edges of one spiral. "They look like the patterns on your arm," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I stared down, my skin crawling as the memory of that crimson line flared hot in my mind. I took her hand and pulled her away. "Don't touch it," I said sharply. "Don't look too long." She nodded, wiping her fingers on her pants like she could scrub the feeling away. We pressed on, weaving through a maze of tall, blade-like rocks that looked more like the jagged teeth of some sleeping giant than natural formations. After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled into a small, open space. A circular depression surrounded by sharp spire. In the center sat a massive split boulder, its surface marred with deep grooves and dark, crusted stains. Lila's breath hitched. "The offering stone," she whispered. "The place where we had left our most precious items, where they had been returned." I staggered forward, compelled by some force I didn't understand. My grandfather's pocket watch lay there again, glittering in the dim, distorted sunlight. Lila's silver ring sat beside it, the turquoise stone now cracked down the center. "They keep bringing them back," she said, her voice trembling. "They don't want our things, they want us." I fell to my knees in front of the stone, my fingers hovering above the watch. My reflection glared back at me from the cracked glass. My face, but older, hollow-eyed, and smiling a thin, cruel smile. Lila sank beside me. "We can't keep running," she said, her voice distant. What if the only way out is to finish it? To give them what they want?" "No," I hissed. "No, we are not giving ourselves to them. We didn't come here to die on our knees." She turned to me, tears streaming down her cheeks, her lips trembling. "What if there is no other way?" A sound echoed across the canyon then, a deep, rumbling growl, so low I felt it in my bones before I heard it. The ground quivered, a fine rain of sand trickling down from the high rock walls. A sudden, cold wind swept over us, carrying a smell so foul it punched the air out of my lungs. Rot, decay, a stench of something ancient and hungry. Lila screamed, her eyes going wide as she pointed over my shoulder. I turned. A figure emerged from the shifting rock. Tall, impossibly thin, its body a patchwork of human faces and hands that writhed and flexed like they were trying to escape. Its head was a smooth, featureless dome that shimmered like hot tar. I scrambled backward, grabbing Lila and pulling her with me. The figure glided forward, its arms unfolding into long claw-like appendages. It moved as though it was swimming through the air, each movement impossibly fluid, horribly graceful. Voices poured from it, hundreds, maybe thousands, all speaking at once. Some cried, some laughed, others just whispered my name again and again until I thought my mind would split in two. "Aiden, Aiden, Aiden." I slammed my palms against my ears, falling to my knees as my vision spun and darkened. Lila's scream sliced through the chorus, sharp and real. "Get up! Aiden, get up!" I forced my eyes open. She was already on her feet, pulling at my arm with desperate strength. I staggered up, my legs barely obeying. We ran, stumbling through the shifting maze, the creature's voices echoing behind us. We didn't look back. We couldn't. Somewhere above, the distorted sun flickered like a dying bulb. The world around us convulsed, reshaping itself as if trying to swallow us whole. We ran until my vision blurred, until every breath tasted like rust. We ran. Because if we stopped, we knew exactly what would happen. We sprinted blindly through the canyon, weaving between pillars of stone that twisted and groaned as if they were alive. My lungs screamed for air. My legs felt like they were splitting open from the inside, but I didn't dare stop. Lila's hand was still wrapped around mine, her grip so strong it felt like she might pull my bones out through my skin. I could hear her sobbing between ragged breaths, her voice a high broken thread cutting through the thunderous chorus behind us. Somewhere far above, the sun flickered again, a sickly throbbing glow that sent long snaking shadows sliding across the canyon floor like black vipers. The walls shifted, curling inward and outward, as if the entire canyon was breathing. Finally, we tumbled into a narrow gulch, crashing into the sand in a tangled heap. My face hit the ground so hard, my vision burst into bright stars. I tried to push myself up, but collapsed again, the world tilting and spinning around me. Lila crawled over, her hands frantic on my face. Aiden, look at me." I forced my eyes open. Her face swam in and out of focus, a shifting blur of blood, tears, and terror. "We can't stop," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded, but her gaze dropped suddenly to my arm. Her eyes went wide, her face draining of what little color remained. I followed her stare. A long, jagged streak of crimson had appeared on my forearm again, this time thicker, darker, almost pulsing. The mark twisted and writhed as if it were alive, shifting shape under my skin. Lila covered her mouth, shaking her head violently. No, it's happening again," she sobbed. I clenched my teeth, trying to fight the nausea that rose like acid in my throat. The mark burned, a searing line of fire crawling up toward my elbow. "Lila, the sketchbook," I gasped. She shook her head, tears spilling over her cheeks. "It's gone. It fell when we crawled through the hollow stone. It's gone." A howl echoed across the canyon, rattling the stones. That chorus of voices rose again, closer this time, the sound of 1,000 people all screaming my name in unison. Lila fell to her knees, clutching my arm. "We have to copy it. We have to find something, anything." She scrambled frantically in the sand, her hands clawing through dust and pebbles. Her fingers closed around a sharp rock, and she turned back to me with wild eyes. "Hold still," she hissed. I bit down on the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. She began scratching the mark into the rock's surface, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it several times. Every stroke sent shards of stone splintering into the air, and every time she paused, I felt the mark crawl higher up my arm, inching toward my shoulder. The voices drew nearer, a rushing tide of sound so loud I thought my skull would split open. My vision tunneled, black spots creeping in at the edges. Lila carved the final line, then threw the rock aside and grabbed my face in her hands. "Look at me. Stay with me." I tried to focus on her eyes, on the freckles across her nose, on the way her hair clung to her sweat-soaked forehead. But my body didn't feel like mine anymore. My fingers twitched uncontrollably, my chest heaving in shallow, ragged gasps. The mark reached my collarbone. I felt a sudden, sharp jolt run down my spine, like an electric shock, and my head snapped backward. Lila screamed my name, her voice echoing against the canyon walls. She clung to me, shaking me violently as my muscles convulsed beneath her hands. I saw flashes, scenes that didn't belong to me. A forest at night, a woman crying in a dark hallway, children laughing in a house I didn't recognize. Faces melted into each other, blending and warping until they dissolved into a black void. Then I heard a voice. Not a chorus this time, a single voice, soft and intimate, coiling around my mind like a snake. "Let go, Aiden. You were never meant to leave." My mouth fell open, but no sound came out. My limbs went limp, and the world fell away beneath me. Then, warmth. Lila's forehead pressed to mine, her breath mingling with mine, hot and ragged. Her hands pressed into my cheeks, grounding me. "Fight it!" she cried, her voice raw and breaking. "Please, Aiden, fight it! I need you! I need you!" Somewhere inside I felt something shift. A faint spark under all that suffocating darkness. I clung to it, like a drowning man grasping a frayed rope. I gasped, my chest seizing. My vision snapped back into focus, and I saw her eyes, wide and wet, inches from mine. The mark on my arm began to flake, splitting into dry, brittle pieces that crumbled away in the wind. Lila sobbed in relief, collapsing against me. I wrapped my arms around her, squeezing so tightly I felt her ribs shift under my grip. We stayed like that, trembling together as the echoes faded into the distance. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were bloodshot but fierce. "We can't let them mark us again," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor. "We have to stay ahead of them. We have to follow the rules, even if we don't understand them." I nodded, though every inch of me felt like it might shatter at any second. "We find the next sign," I rasped. "We find whatever's next." A low rumble rolled across the canyon then, and I felt the ground shift beneath us. In the distance, the rocks rearranged themselves, forming a narrow path leading deeper into the maze of stone. I looked at Lila. She squeezed my hand, her grip strong and resolute despite the blood under her nails. "We do this together," she said. I took one shaky breath, nodded once, and together we rode. With each step, the path seemed to breathe beneath us, pulsing like a living artery. The canyon walls closed in, the sky above warping into an almost liquid swirl of orange and violet. But we kept moving, because whatever lay ahead, whatever horror waited for us, it was still better than giving up, better than becoming another echo in that endless screaming chorus. We moved forward, step by step, into that shifting canyon. Every few feet, the walls seemed to lean in, as if trying to squeeze us until we vanished. The ground beneath us pulsed faintly, like some giant creature's heartbeat echoing from deep under the sand. The sky above churned with that unnatural swirl of orange and violet, flickering in and out like a broken signal. Occasionally, I thought I saw faces in the clouds, wide, hollow eyes and twisted mouths that screamed silently before dissolving into vapor. Lila gripped my hand so tightly that I felt the bones grind together. I didn't pull away. Her touch was the last thing anchoring me to what was left of my mind. After what felt like an hour, or maybe days, time had become a cruel joke. The canyon opened into a narrow basin filled with shallow pools. The water in them was dark and glassy, reflecting the warped sky in ways that made my stomach twist. Lila dropped my hand and moved forward cautiously. "Aiden," she whispered, "look." I stepped up beside her and stared into the nearest pool. Our reflections looked back at us, but they were wrong. My reflection grinned at me with a mouth that split far too wide, stretching nearly ear to ear. Its eyes were pools of pitch black, endless and hungry. It moved slightly out of sync with me, as if it knew the steps, but decided to dance to a different rhythm. Lila's reflection tilted its head, watching her with a kind of vicious curiosity. Its arms hung too long, fingers brushing the water's surface like spider legs. Then it smiled, a sharp, predatory curve that turned my blood to ice. Lila stumbled backward, her foot splashing into another pool. She screamed, the sound raw and jagged. "No! No, don't look at them!" she shrieked. I lunged forward, grabbing her by the waist and pulling her back. Water soaked into her pants, leaving a dark, spreading stain. The second her foot left the pool, the reflections in all the other pools rippled violently, twisting and swirling into grotesque shapes. Suddenly, dozens of black hands shot up from the water, clawing at the air. The reflections climbed out, their movements jerky and insect-like, their distorted faces contorting as they crawled toward us. I grabbed Lila's face, forcing her to look at me. "Breathe," I shouted. Breathe and count. She choked out a sob, tears streaking down her dirt-smeared cheeks. 1, 2, 3. Behind her, I watched one of my reflections scuttle forward, its arms bending backward at impossible angles. It opened its mouth wide and let out a gurgling moan, black sludge pouring from its lips. 4, 5, Lila gasped, her body shaking against my hands. I pulled her close, turning us both so I could keep my back to the approaching things. Don't look at them, I snarled. Just keep counting. I felt cold fingers brush the back of my neck, leaving a smear of freezing slime in their wake. My vision went white for a second, stars bursting behind my eyes. 6, 7, 8. Lila sobbed into my shoulder. The reflections pressed closer. I could hear them mimicking our breathing, our screams, even our heartbeat. Each sound echoed a half-second too late, like a broken record stuck on a loop. Then, through the cacophony, I heard a voice, calm, familiar, impossibly close. Aiden, you're so tired. Just turn around. Let us take it from here. It sounded like me, exactly like me. My legs buckled. Lila clung to me, her counting turning into a panicked chant. 9, 10, 11. The voice came again, softer this time. You can rest. Just look. Just one look. I almost turned. My head started to move on its own, like a string had been tied around my jaw and someone was tugging. But then Lila's voice cracked through the fog. 12, 13. Aiden, please. 14. I snapped my head back, my neck popping painfully. In that moment, something inside me snapped too, a hot surge of rage roaring through my chest. I spun around, dragging Lila with me, and shoved her toward a narrow passage between two rock walls that I hadn't noticed before. Run! I roared. She hesitated for a heartbeat too long. One of the reflections lunged at her, fingers outstretched, its warped face splitting open like a blooming flower of teeth. I threw myself between them, grabbing the thing's arm. It felt slick and cold, like wet clay. I shoved it back, feeling its bones grind and crack under my grip. Lila scrambled into the passage, her sobs echoing off the stone. I turned and ran after her, the reflection screaming behind us, the sound tearing at the inside of my skull like broken glass. We bolted down the tight corridor, stumbling over rocks and slipping on slick patches of black moss. The passage twisted and narrowed, the walls so close they scraped our shoulders raw. Finally, we burst into a cavern, the ceiling arcing high above us. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the walls, pulsing like dying embers. Lila fell to the ground, crawling backward until her back hit the wall. She wrapped her arms around her knees, rocking and gasping for breath. I collapsed beside her, my entire body shaking. For a few seconds there was only silence, heavy, suffocating, but somehow blessed after the chaos outside. I turned to her, grabbing her face in my hands. We're still here, I panted. We're still us. She looked at me, her pupils blown wide, her lips trembling. I almost let go, she whispered. I almost wanted to look. I pressed my forehead to hers, our sweat mixing, our hearts slamming in chaotic rhythm. We can't, I said. That's how they get in. We have to stay together. We have to stay human. Her fingers dug into my arms like hooks, but she nodded, her tears splashing onto my cheeks. Outside, the echoes of the reflections faded into a low, angry moan. The cavern shuddered once, then stilled. We didn't know what waited beyond this chamber. We didn't know if we would make it out. But for now, in that hollow breath between terrors, we held each other. We were still ourselves, and that had to be enough. We sat there for what felt like hours. Lila's breathing finally slowed, her fingers loosening their death grip on my arms. I could feel the tremors still running through her body, like a low, constant earthquake that would never quite stop. My own heart hammered so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs from the inside. Every breath I took was sharp and metallic, the air in that cavern thick with the smell of rock dust and something else, something sweet and sickly, like rotting flowers. I pulled back and looked at her. Even in this darkness, the faint glow of those strange symbols along the walls painted her face in pale, shifting light. Her eyes looked impossibly large, wide with fear and something else, a flicker of something defiant still burning deep inside. She pressed her forehead into my shoulder, her voice a ragged whisper. "We can't keep running forever," she said. "We can't just keep following rules we don't even understand." I swallowed hard, the motion painful, my throat raw and dry. "I know," I said, "but if we stop now, we're done. You saw what they become. We can't let them take us." She shuddered and pulled away slightly. Her eyes drifted over my shoulder, toward the walls covered in glowing marks. "Do you see those?" she whispered. I turned. The markings seemed to pulse in and out of focus, like they were being viewed through a layer of water. Spirals, jagged lines, handprints, symbols that looked like eyes, some open, some closed. I stood up shakily, stepping toward the wall. The closer I got, the stronger the buzzing in my head became, a deep, resonant hum that made my teeth ache. Lila stood too, her hands sliding into mine again, her fingers clammy and cold. They're instructions," she said suddenly. "A map. Or warnings." I pressed my palm to one of the spirals. It felt warm, almost alive, like flesh instead of stone. My vision flickered, and for a second I saw something else, a shifting desert landscape, the canyon warped and endless, dotted with figures crawling on all fours. I jerked my hand back, stumbling. Lila caught me before I fell. "What did you see?" she asked, her voice sharp with urgency. I shook my head, sweat dripping into my eyes. "Places," I gasped. "Past people? Or things, moving, watching." She stepped forward and pressed both her hands against another section of the wall. Her head snapped back slightly, her lips parting in a silent gasp. I grabbed her shoulders, ready to pull her away, but she held firm. Then she started to speak, softly at first, like she was repeating something she heard from very far away. "There's a route, a place deeper in the canyon. A gate, maybe? But it's guarded, watched by them. The ones from the reflections." Her knees buckled and I pulled her back before she collapsed. She fell into me, trembling, her breath ragged and shallow. They want us to finish something," she whispered. "They want us to take the mark all the way to the end." I felt that old nausea roll up in my gut again. "No," I growled. "They can't have us. We're not finishing anything for them." She looked up at me, her expression tortured. "But what if it's the only way out?" I shook my head, tightening my grip on her arms. "I don't care. If they want us to finish it, it means we have a choice. We have to find another way." For a long moment, she just stared at me, her eyes brimming with tears. Then, slowly, she nodded. I turned back to the glowing wall, my eyes darting across the shifting symbols. My fingers brushed over an outline that looked vaguely like a path, a thin, jagged line winding through a mass of spirals and eyes. "Here," I said, pointing. "If this is a path, it looks like it leads somewhere, away from the center." Lila stepped closer, studying it. "It might be another trap," she said, her voice shaking. "It might be," I admitted, "but it's the only lead we have." She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a stub of charcoal she'd picked up earlier. She began copying the outline of the path onto her arm, the black smears mixing with old cuts and dirt. When she finished, she looked at me, her jaw set. "We follow this," she said. "Together." I nodded. "Together," I echoed, my voice little more than a whisper. We turned away from the wall. The cavern had two exits, one to the left, leading into a deeper, darker tunnel, and one to the right, where a faint glimmer of that warped sunlight filtered through. We chose the light. Stepping out into the canyon again felt like surfacing from underwater. The air was hot and heavy, the sky above still a swirling mass of sickly orange and purple. The stone around us creaked and shifted, as if it were breathing. We moved quickly, following the charcoal map on Lila's arm. Every few steps, she glanced at it, her lips moving silently as she traced the lines with her fingers. Suddenly, she stopped dead, her arm shooting out to block me. Ahead of us, a figure stood at the end of a narrow stone bridge that spanned a deep chasm. At first I thought it was Jonas again, same ragged clothes, same gaunt silhouette. But when it turned to face us, I saw my own face staring back at me. My reflection, fully formed, solid, real. Its eyes were pitch black voids, its smile a perfect mirror of my deepest nightmares. Lila let out a strangled gasp, her nails digging into my forearm. "It's you," she whispered. "It's the final mark. They want you to finish it." I stepped forward, my fists clenched so tight, my nails cut into my palms. "No," I said. "I won't play your game." The reflection tilted its head, its smile widening until it split its cheeks open, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Then it stepped forward onto the bridge, moving with a fluid, inhuman grace. Lila grabbed my arm, her voice barely a squeak. "Aiden, what do we do?" I felt something inside me ignite, a violent, desperate spark of defiance that pushed back against the endless weight pressing down on us. I turned to her, my eyes locked on hers. "We finish it on our terms," I said. "Not theirs." I stepped onto the bridge. The reflection let out a shrill, gurgling laugh and rushed forward. Behind me, I heard Lila scream my name as I braced myself to fight the worst parts of myself and whatever was waiting beyond that canyon's edge. I stepped onto that narrow stone bridge, the abyss yawning below like an open throat waiting to swallow me whole. Each footfall echoed forever, swallowed and thrown back, distorted by the canyon walls. The reflection moved toward me with slow, deliberate steps, its head cocked at that impossible angle, mouth still gaping in that horrible, jagged smile, its eyes, or the dark pits where eyes should have been, locked on mine. And for a second I felt my mind buckling under the weight of that gaze. Behind me, Lila called out, her voice sharp with terror. "Aiden, don't go alone, please." But I didn't look back. If I did, I knew I'd break. The reflection stopped a few feet in front of me. It tilted its head again, studying me like a scientist might inspect an insect pinned to a board. Then, slowly, it raised its hand, palm up, and beckoned. A voice split the air, not just one voice, but a chorus. My voice, Lila's voice, my father's, strangers I had never heard. All layered, echoing, filling my head until I thought my skull would explode. "Come home, Aiden. Become whole. Finish it." I felt my knees start to give, my chest convulsed, and I almost pitched forward. Then Lila's scream cut through the fog like a blade. "Aiden, I'm here! Fight it!" I sucked in a shuddering breath, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. I tightened my fists so hard that my nails sliced into my palms. "No," I growled, "I'm not yours." The reflection twitched violently, its smile disappearing into a thin, straight slit. It lowered its hand, and for a moment, it just stood there, trembling like a marionette waiting for strings to be pulled. Then it lunged. I barely had time to brace. It slammed into me with a force that knocked the air from my lungs. We tumbled backward, sliding dangerously close to the bridge edge. I felt hot, slick hands grabbing at my face, my throat, my arms. Its strength was inhuman. Every touch burned as if acid was searing my skin. I slammed my elbow into its side, but it only laughed, that awful, bubbling noise echoing in the canyon. It pressed its face close to mine, and I smelled rot and sulfur. "You are me," it rasped. "And I am you," I roared, shoving my forehead into its face. The force staggered it for a moment, enough for me to roll on top. I grabbed its throat, though it felt like grabbing a bag of writhing worms, and slammed its head into the stone. Once, twice, 3 times. Black sludge oozed from cracks in its skull, splattering onto my arms and chest, burning holes in my clothes and skin. I screamed in pain but didn't let go. From behind, I heard Lila's voice. "Aiden, take this." I glanced back. She was crouched at the edge of the bridge, holding the stone talisman, the same one Jonas had given us. The runes on it blazed now, bright and alive, casting harsh white light that painted everything in sharp shadows. I grabbed it from her, my fingers immediately searing from the heat. The reflection beneath me shrieked, its limbs thrashing like broken branches. "Don't do it," it howled in my voice, pleading. "We can be free together." I lifted the talisman high, feeling every nerve in my body scream. "This is my choice," I roared. I drove the talisman into its chest. The reflection arched its back, its mouth gaping wider than physically possible. A chorus of screams ripped from its throat. Mine, Lila's, hundreds of others, all layered in a sickening cacophony. The bridge trembled, cracks spider-webbing out from beneath us. The abyss below roared, a wind rushing up so strong it nearly knocked me off balance. The reflection's body began to collapse inward, folding like paper, black sludge pouring from every tear and wound. The talisman glowed so brightly I had to avert my eyes. Then, with one final ear-splitting shriek, the reflection imploded into itself, leaving behind nothing but a smear of black residue and a spreading web of cracks in the stone. I staggered backward, the talisman slipping from my numb fingers and clattering to the ground. I fell to my knees, gasping, the smell of charred hair and sulfur choking me. Lila sprinted across the bridge to me, nearly slipping on the shaking stones. She fell to her knees in front of me, grabbing my face in her hands. "Aiden! Aiden, look at me! Are you here? Are you still you?" I tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. I nodded, the motion jerky and weak. She pulled me into her arms, her sobs echoing in the empty canyon. I clung to her, my hands digging into her back, afraid that if I let go I might drift away into the void that had almost swallowed me. After what felt like an eternity, the trembling stopped. The wind died, and a suffocating stillness settled over the canyon. I pulled back and looked at her. Her eyes wide, terrified but alive. "We did it," I croaked. We beat it." Lila shook her head slowly, her breath catching. "No," she whispered. "Look." She pointed past my shoulder. I turned, my stomach dropping into the void below. Beyond the bridge, the canyon had changed again. The stone walls had rearranged into a narrow, spiraling path leading downward, deeper into the earth. Along the walls, the same glowing symbols we had seen in the cavern pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "They wanted you to do this," Lila said, her voice breaking. "They wanted you to open the way." I stared into the spiraling path, horror crawling up my spine. "It was never about the reflections," I said, my voice barely audible. "It was about opening the gate." She grabbed my hand, squeezing it so hard it hurt. "We don't have to keep going," she said. "We can turn back. We can find another way." But we both knew the truth. The canyon wouldn't let us leave. The rules had always led us forward, deeper, closer to whatever horror waited at the heart of this place. I looked at her, my voice steady despite the tremor in my bones. "If we don't finish this, it won't stop. It'll keep calling people here. It'll keep taking them." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She pressed her forehead to mine, her breath shaking. "Then we finish it together," she whispered. I nodded, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. We turned to face the spiraling descent. Our hands locked so tightly they felt fused, and then, without looking back, we stepped into the darkness. We stepped into the spiral, and the canyon swallowed us whole. The moment we crossed the threshold, the air changed, thicker, denser, like walking into a cave full of stagnant water. Every breath tasted metallic, heavy with iron and something sickly sweet that turned my stomach. The walls around us pulsed with that faint glow, the symbols crawling slowly like veins under translucent skin. Each step echoed down into a darkness so deep it felt bottomless, like we were descending into the throat of some ancient, sleeping god. Lila squeezed my hand tighter with each step. I could feel her pulse in her fingers, a frantic rhythm that matched my own. "I don't think this place ever ends," she whispered, her voice barely carrying in the heavy air. I swallowed, the motion sharp and painful. "It ends somewhere," I said. "It has to." But even as I said it, doubt coiled around my thoughts like a parasite. The deeper we went, the narrower the path became. The stone floor slick with a thin layer of something viscous that clung to our boots, leaving dark smears behind us. The light from the symbols grew stronger, illuminating the way ahead but casting our shadows in sharp, monstrous shapes against the walls. I tried not to look at those shadows. Every time I caught them out of the corner of my eye, they seemed to move wrong, lagging behind us, twisting into shapes that didn't match our bodies. Lila stumbled suddenly, her shoulders slamming into the wall. She gasped, dropping to her knees. I knelt beside her, grabbing her face. "Lila, look at me. Are you okay?" She nodded weakly, tears welling in her eyes. It's whispering," she choked out. "The walls, they're whispering." I pressed my ear to the stone and nearly recoiled. Beneath the hum, I heard them. Voices, hundreds of them, whispering in a language I didn't understand. Some sounded like Lila, some like me, others like strangers whose screams echoed in my bones. I pulled her up, wrapping my arm around her waist. "Don't listen," I said, my voice shaking. "Just focus on my voice, just me." She buried her face into my shoulder, nodding. We continued downward. The spiral stretched on, impossibly long, until I lost track of how many steps we'd taken. The light from above was gone now, replaced only by that sickly glow from the walls. Suddenly, the path widened into a small chamber. The walls here were covered entirely in carvings, faces frozen mid-scream, hands clawing outward and eyes, hundreds of eyes, all watching us with silent judgment. In the center stood a pillar, waist-high, slick with dark fluid that trickled down its sides and pooled at the base. Atop it lay another talisman, similar to the one Jonas had given us, but larger, its runes seared deep and pulsing with a harsh red light. Lila stepped forward slowly, her breath hitching. It's a final marker," she whispered. "A seal, or a key." I moved beside her, my gaze fixed on the talisman. I could feel its heat from feet away, radiating like a furnace. My mind screamed at me to turn back, to run, to claw my way up that spiral and never stop. But there was no turning back now. Lila reached for it, her fingers trembling. "Wait," I said, grabbing her wrist. She turned to me, her eyes wide and shimmering in the red glow. "What if it's a trap?" I asked. "What if picking it up finishes whatever they started?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "What choice do we have, Aiden? We can't climb back. We can't stay here. We can't keep running." I clenched my jaw, my heart hammering so hard it drowned out the whispers. I searched her face for any sign of hesitation, any crack that might mean we could still choose another path. But her expression was resolute, terrified, but resolute. Finally, I released her wrist, nodding once. "Together," I said, my voice low. She nodded, taking a sharp breath. Then she reached forward, her fingers wrapping around the talisman. The moment she lifted it, the entire chamber trembled. A deep, resonant moan rolled through the stone, the sound so low I felt it in my bones. The faces carved into the walls began to shift, their mouths opening wider, their eyes rolling back into empty voids. Lila screamed, dropping to her knees. The talisman flared brighter, spilling red light across her face, highlighting every crack of fear and agony. I dropped beside her, grabbing her shoulders. "Lila! Lila, look at me! Stay with me!" She looked up, her pupils shrunk in pinpoints in a sea of white. "It's in my head," she sobbed. "It's showing me! It's showing me everything!" The whispers rose into a chorus of shrieks, a language so alien it made my teeth hurt. I grabbed the talisman, my hand burning immediately. My skin sizzled, but I didn't let go. The pain anchored me, keeping me from falling into whatever abyss was clawing at her mind. I pressed my forehead against hers. "Breathe with me," I hissed through clenched teeth. "Breathe. Count, just like before." She squeezed her eyes shut, her breaths shallow and stuttering. 1, 2, 3. The chamber roared around us, the walls cracking, the faces weeping black ichor that dripped onto the floor and steamed where it touched. 4, 5, 6. I held her tighter, our hands crushed together around the talisman. My flesh bubbled and split, the pain so sharp I thought I might pass out. But I focused on her voice, on each trembling count. 7, 8, 9. The glow from the talisman flickered, then pulsed violently. The air warped around us, the entire chamber shaking like it might collapse. 10, she screamed, and then silence. The glow faded, the shrieking voices cut off mid-echo, leaving only our ragged breathing in the dark. We collapsed together, the talisman clattering to the floor beside us, its light gone. I pressed my forehead to hers, our sweat and tears mixing. "We're still here," I whispered. She nodded, her breaths coming in trembling bursts. "But for how long?" she choked out. I pulled her closer, burying my face in her hair. "As long as we have to," I said. "As long as it takes." The canyon wasn't done with us, but in that fragile moment, we had each other. And for now, that had to be enough. I don't know how long we lay there. The chamber was silent now, the glow from the talisman completely gone. Only the faintest echo of our breathing and the occasional drip of black ichor from the walls filled the space. Lila's head rested against my chest, her hair clinging to my skin in sweaty clumps. My arms were wrapped around her like a lifeline. Or maybe I was the one being kept alive by her warmth, her heartbeat. Eventually she stirred. Her fingers twitched against my ribs and she pulled her head back to look at me. Her eyes were swollen, her lips cracked, but there was a flicker of fire still alive behind that exhaustion. "We need to move," she croaked, her voice like gravel. I nodded, even though every part of my body screamed to stay put, to collapse into the cold stone and disappear forever. I forced myself upright. My hands were burned and raw from gripping the talisman. The skin bubbled and split open in places. I flexed them, wincing at the pain. Lila reached for me, her touch careful. "Your hands," she whispered. I shook my head. "They'll work," I rasped. "They have to." She glanced around the chamber, then down at the dark pool forming around the base of the pillar where the talisman had been. In the center of that pool, a new opening had appeared, a jagged, gaping wound in the floor leading downward into pitch-black nothing. "It's calling us," she whispered. I swallowed, tasting ash and iron. "It's the final step," I said. "The last rule they didn't write down?" We approached the hole slowly, our feet slipping on the slick stone. As we drew closer, a deep hum rose from below, vibrating through my bones like a distant engine. I looked at her, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. The canyon, the symbols, the reflections. Just us. Just two souls clinging to each other in the dark. "Whatever happens," I said, my voice shaking, "we stayed together." She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Together?" she echoed. We stepped to the edge and looked down. It felt endless, like staring into the open mouth of the earth. The hum grew louder, a deep, resonant call that seemed to vibrate in time with my heart. Without another word, we climbed down. The rock walls inside the shaft were slick and close, our shoulders scraping raw against them as we shimmied lower. The deeper we went, the hotter the air became, thick and stifling, carrying that same rotting flower scent that always heralded something worse. My hand slipped on the damp stone, the wounds reopening with every grip. I gritted my teeth, refusing to let go. Above me, I could hear Lila's ragged breaths echoing, her feet scrambling against the rock. At last, the shaft opened into a massive cavern. I dropped the last few feet and landed hard, my knees buckling. Lila followed seconds later, stumbling into me, and we both collapsed in a heap. We looked up slowly. The cavern was unlike anything we'd seen before. The walls were covered in a lattice of veins that glowed a deep crimson, pulsing steadily like a giant heartbeat. Strange structures rose from the ground, bone-like spires twisted into grotesque shapes, each one decorated with pieces of cloth, trinkets, and human remains. At the far end of the cavern stood a massive archway carved from black stone, its surface etched with runes that shifted and squirmed as if alive. Beyond it, only darkness, an absolute suffocating darkness that felt more solid than the rock beneath our feet. Lila's nails dug into my arm. "The gate," she breathed. "It's real." I nodded, my head heavy. "They wanted us to bring the talisman here," I said. It was a key. We looked down. The talisman lay between us on the ground, dark and lifeless, but somehow it still radiated heat. Lila bent forward, her fingers hovering above it. "They want us to finish the ritual," she said, her voice trembling. "They want us to open it fully, to let them through." A cold rage surged through me, momentarily washing away the exhaustion. "No," I hissed. "We don't finish it for them. We end it here." She looked at me, her eyes wide. "How?" she asked, her voice breaking. I clenched my fists, blood running between my fingers. "We use the talisman, not to open it, but to seal it. We have to try." Lila hesitated, then nodded. "Together," she whispered again. We stood and approached the gate, the hum growing so loud it felt like my bones might shatter. My vision blurred at the edges, and it felt like I was wading through thick, black tar with each step. When we reached the base of the arch, I could feel the void beyond it pulling at my mind, like invisible hands clawing at my thoughts. I forced myself to focus on Lila beside me, on the warmth of her fingers tangled with mine. She pressed the talisman into my palm. It burned hotter than anything I had ever felt, but I held on. "Now," I gasped. Together, we pressed the talisman against the arch. A blast of searing light exploded outward, blinding us both. I screamed, feeling my skin blister and crack. The runes on the gate twisted and writhed, splitting and fracturing like shattering glass. The cavern roared, the walls shaking violently. Chunks of stone fell around us, and I felt Lila's grip tighten, her nails digging so deep into my arm I thought they might pierce bone. A deafening howl rose from the void beyond the gate, a sound so deep it felt like it came from the center of the earth. Voices shrieked in agony, rage, hunger. The air became a cyclone of dust and ash, tearing at our clothes and skin. I pushed harder, my arms screaming with effort. "Hold on!" I shouted, though I couldn't hear my own voice over the roar. The talisman pulsed one final time, then shattered into 1,000 shards of searing white light. The gate convulsed, the black stone cracking down the center. But a thunderous crack split the cavern, and the void began to collapse inward, folding in on itself like a dying star. I felt myself being pulled toward it. Lila's hands clamped onto mine, her scream lost in the chaos. Then, silence. The light vanished. The pull stopped. The cavern fell still. We collapsed together, shaking, covered in blood, ash, and glowing fragments of the talisman. Lila crawled over to me, pulling my head into her lap. It's over," she sobbed, her fingers running through my hair. "We did it." I looked up at her, my vision swimming. "We're still here," I whispered, my voice nothing but a broken echo. She leaned down and pressed her forehead to mine, her tears dripping onto my face. "Together," she breathed. And in that moment, broken, terrified, but alive, we were. I don't know how long we lay there. Every breath rattled through me like shards of glass, each exhale carrying the taste of ash and blood. My head rested in Lila's lap, her trembling fingers weaving through my hair, anchoring me to something real, something human. Around us, the cavern had gone silent. The pulsing veins on the walls had dulled to a dead gray, their light gone as if the blood had been sucked from them. Pieces of the shattered talisman glittered around us like fallen stars, each shard still faintly warm to the touch. Lila leaned down, her forehead pressing against mine. I felt her tears dripping onto my cheeks, mingling with the sweat and grime. "It's over," she whispered, her voice raw and hoarse. "We closed it. We really did." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But in that sudden quiet, I felt something deeper than relief. A creeping dread that coiled in the pit of my stomach. I sat up slowly, my joints screaming in protest. My body felt like it had been broken and stitched back together with barbed wire. Lila shifted beside me, her arms slipping around my waist. We scanned the cavern together. The massive archway still loomed ahead, but the void beyond it was gone. In its place was nothing but a wall of fractured stone, its surface rough and jagged like a freshly healed wound. I rose to my feet shakily, pulling Lila up with me, our fingers laced together automatically. a lifeline neither of us could afford to let go. "We have to get out," I rasped. She nodded. "But where?" I turned in a slow circle, my eyes straining in the dim light. On the far side of the cavern, behind the collapsed archway, a narrow passageway had appeared, a jagged crack in the rock, just wide enough for us to slip through. "There," I said, pointing. We staggered toward it, our footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. Every sound seemed to bounce back at us a dozen times, warping and stretching until it felt like voices murmuring just out of reach. At the crack, we hesitated. I turned to Lila, searching her face. "You sure?" I asked, my voice trembling. She let out a weak laugh, the sound equal parts hysterical and triumphant. "No," she said, "but since when did we have a choice?" I squeezed her hand once, then ducked into the crack. The rock pressed against my shoulders and hips, scraping away fresh layers of skin, but I kept moving. Behind me, I heard Lila's strained breaths, her occasional sharp gasps as the rock tore at her clothes and skin. The tunnel curved downward in tight, suffocating spirals. Each turn felt like it was leading us deeper into the earth, but there was no going back. The walls felt alive, contracting and expanding subtly with each breath I took, like the inside of some massive buried creature. At one point, the tunnel opened into a small chamber. In the center stood an ancient altar, covered in symbols that pulsed faintly in the dark, their light like the last embers of a dying fire. Lila brushed her fingers across the symbols, her face contorted in horror and fascination. They're stories," she whispered. "Warnings, histories of everyone who came before us and failed." I stepped closer, squinting at the carvings. Figures twisted in agony, their faces melting into the walls, their hands reaching upward as if trying to claw their way out. Others showed shapes pouring through gates, devouring everything in their path. It felt like the walls were watching us, waiting for us to make the same mistake. Lila's hand slipped into mine again. Her palm was sticky with blood and sweat. "We have to keep moving," she said, "before it changes its mind." I nodded, my throat too tight to form words. We slipped past the altar, deeper into the tunnel. The path narrowed again, then abruptly widened into another chamber, this one much larger, with a high ceiling covered in hanging stalactites that glistened like rows of teeth. A pool of black water sat in the center, its surface unnaturally still. It reflected everything with crystal clarity, but as I stepped closer, my reflection didn't move in sync. It just stood there, staring at me with a blank, hungry expression. Lila gasped, grabbing my arm. "Don't look at it," she hissed. "Remember the rule. Don't trust reflections." I tore my gaze away, shoving her gently past the pool. The water rippled behind us, the sound like 1,000 tiny whispers laughing in the dark. At the far end of the chamber, another tunnel opened, this one sloping upward, the first upward path we'd seen in what felt like an eternity. Hope, fragile and dangerous, sparked in my chest. I turned to Lila, my voice shaking. "This could be it," I said. "A way out." She nodded, her eyes wide and wild. "Let's finish this," she said. We began the climb, scrambling up the slick stone, our hands and feet slipping but refusing to stop. Every muscle in my body burned, my lungs screaming for air, but each step felt like tearing through layers of suffocating darkness, clawing our way back to something like life. The tunnel twisted violently, the walls pressing in, forcing us to squeeze sideways, to crawl on hands and knees. Every inch was a battle, every breath a gamble. At one point, the ceiling dropped so low I had to flatten my body against the floor and push forward like a worm. Lila's hand stayed on my ankle the entire time, her silent promise that she wouldn't let me vanish into the dark. Finally, the tunnel widened again. Ahead, I saw it, a pinprick of pale light. Real light. I almost sobbed. "There!" I croaked. We crawled faster, driven by that single point of brightness. It grew larger, wider, until it filled the tunnel ahead like the mouth of salvation. I reached it first, pulling myself up onto a ledge. I turned and grabbed Lila's arms, hauling her up beside me. We collapsed together, gasping, our chests heaving. Then, slowly, we turned to look behind us. The tunnel behind was gone. The walls had sealed shut, smooth and solid as if it had never existed. Lila looked at me, her eyes wide with shock and wonder. "We made it," she whispered. I looked up at the sky, a real sky, vast and endless, painted in streaks of purple and orange as dawn approached. The first fresh air in what felt like centuries filled my lungs, and I laughed, a broken, breathless sound that turned into a sob. Lila grabbed my face, pressing her forehead against mine. "We're still here," she breathed, "together." And in that moment, as the first rays of sunlight touched our skin, I finally believed it. The sky above us was streaked with lavender and crimson, like a fresh bruise spreading across the horizon. The first rays of morning light felt almost alien against my skin, too pure, too clean after the endless darkness. Lila and I sat side by side at the cave's edge, staring out into the vast, open desert that spread below us. The canyon lay behind us now, hidden by a sheer wall of rock that looked as if it had never been breached. It felt impossible that we had ever been inside it, fighting for every breath and every heartbeat. Lila's hand trembled in mine, her nails caked with dirt and blood. She pressed closer, her shoulder resting against mine, her head dropping onto my chest. "It's real," she whispered, her voice cracking. This is real." I looked down at her, at the cuts on her face and the dirt smeared across her forehead. I touched her cheek gently, and she closed her eyes, leaning into my hand like a dying flower reaching for sunlight. "It's real," I echoed, though my voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. A sharp gust of wind swept over us, carrying the dry, familiar scent of desert sage and hot stone. I inhaled deeply, trying to purge the rotting flower stench still haunting my lungs. But as the breeze faded, a faint echo drifted up from below, a low, almost imperceptible hum that crawled under my skin. I tensed, every muscle in my body going rigid. Lila felt it too. She lifted her head slowly, her wide eyes searching mine. "You hear it?" she said, her voice barely above a breath. I nodded. "They're still there," I said. "We didn't destroy them. We just closed the door." She shivered, her fingers tightening around mine like a vice. "They'll call someone else," she whispered, "like they called us." I swallowed hard, my throat raw. "They always do," I said. "But we made it out. We're still here." Silence settled between us again, heavy and suffocating. The sun crept higher, spilling gold across the desert floor. Every ray felt like a promise and a threat all at once. Lila shifted, her eyes drifting toward the horizon. "What now?" she asked. "Where do we go?" I followed her gaze, my thoughts scattering in the wind. We had no car, no supplies, no map. Our packs were still somewhere in the canyon's depths, lost among the blood and shadows. But for the first time in what felt like centuries, I felt a spark of something that wasn't terror or rage. It wasn't quite hope, but it was close. "We walk," I said finally. "We just keep moving, one step at a time." Lila let out a broken laugh, pressing her forehead to my shoulder. "One step at a time," she repeated. She pushed herself up slowly, her legs shaking. I stood too, every joint screaming in protest. My burned hands hung at my sides like dead weights, but I could still move. That was enough. Together, we stepped out from the ledge onto the rocky slope. The sun rose higher behind us, burning away the shadows and illuminating the endless, merciless desert ahead. As we moved, the humming behind us grew softer, fading into the background noise of wind and rustling sand. But I knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting, patient and eternal. At one point, Lila stumbled on a loose rock. I caught her before she fell, and she looked up at me with tears brimming in her eyes. "I can't believe we made it," she said, her voice shaking. "I thought I lost you so many times." I tightened my grip on her hand, pulling her closer. "You did the same for me," I said, over and over. She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her dirty hand. "I don't want to go back there," she whispered. "You won't," I said, though even as I spoke I felt the lie twist in my chest. The canyon wasn't a place you left behind. It crawled inside you, into your bones, your blood. Even out here under the clean sky, I felt its mark simmering under my skin. We kept moving, following no path but the sun. Our shadows stretched long across the sand, merging and separating as we stumbled forward. As we walked, I glanced back once, just once. The canyon's edge was still visible in the distance, a black scar in the desert floor, and for a moment I thought I saw something standing there. A tall, thin figure, its head tilted, watching us. I turned away quickly, my heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't tell Lila. I didn't need to. Some truths were too heavy to share, even between two people who had survived hell together. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, scorching our skin, baking the sand beneath our feet. We shared sips of water from a broken canteen we'd found half buried in the sand. The taste metallic and warm, but it kept us moving. Eventually, we reached a small plateau overlooking the endless dunes. Lila collapsed to her knees, her body shaking with exhaustion. I dropped beside her, my burned hands resting uselessly in my lap. We sat in silence, our chests rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Lila turned to me, her voice barely a whisper. "If we make it? If someone finds us? What do we tell them?" I looked at her, really looked, as the cracks in her lips, the dark circles under her eyes, the tiny cuts and bruises that mapped her entire body. "The truth," I said eventually. "All of it." She stared at me for a moment, then nodded, her eyes glimmering with something fragile and fierce. "Then we'll believe us," she said. I let out a low, broken laugh. "Then we'll make them," I said, "one way or another." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against mine. Our breaths mingled, hot and ragged. "We're still here," she whispered. "Together," I breathed back. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the desert in streaks of dying gold, we sat side by side, two survivors with nothing left but each other, and the echo of a canyon that would haunt us forever. We were broken, we were lost, but we were alive. The desert seemed endless. Each step felt like dragging a mountain behind me. The sand shifted under my feet, slipping and pulling me backward with every inch I gained. My throat was raw, my lips cracked and bleeding from the dry wind that cut across the dunes like knives. Lila trudged ahead of me, her shoulders hunched, her hair plastered to her face with sweat and dust. Every few yards she would glance back, her eyes searching for me in that shimmering heat haze, making sure I was still there. I was. Barely. We had no food, almost no water left, and no sense of where we were going. But the thought of stopping, of lying down and letting the sun or the sand or whatever was left of that canyon swallow us, was worse. I forced my legs to move, one after another. My burned hands hung useless at my sides, each step sending shocks of pain up my arms. I focused on Lila's footprints in the sand, using them like a lifeline. Somewhere in the late afternoon, the dunes finally broke into a flat stretch of hard, sun-baked earth. We collapsed there, side by side, panting. Lila pressed her forehead into her arms, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I turned onto my back, staring up at the endless blue above us. For the first time since we escaped the canyon, I let my mind drift. I saw flashes, the black water, the screaming reflections, the faces in the stone. My own reflection's twisted grin as I drove the talisman into its chest. Lila's voice calling me back from the edge, over and over. I felt tears slide down my temples, into my hairline. They evaporated almost instantly in the heat. Lila sat up suddenly, her face streaked with salt and dirt. "We can't stop here," she rasped, her voice shredded. "We have to find shelter, before night." I knew she was right. The desert wasn't just deadly under the sun. The cold that came after dark could kill us just as easily. I sat up, every joint crackling. Lila offered her hand and I took it. We pulled each other to our feet and started walking again. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the shadows stretched across the desert like fingers. The air turned sharper, colder. I felt the burn on my hands shift from a searing ache to a deep, throbbing chill. After what felt like hours, we saw it, a structure in the distance. At first, I thought it was a mirage, another trick of the heat and exhaustion. But as we got closer, the outline solidified, a small shack, half collapsed, its wooden walls sun-bleached and warped. We stumbled toward it, tripping over rocks and each other. By the time we reached it, the last light had drained from the sky, leaving only a violet smear above the horizon. Lila pushed the warped door open. It creaked like an animal in pain. Inside, the space was barely large enough for us to lie down. A rusted cot leaned against one wall, a cracked basin in the corner. We collapsed onto the dirt floor without a word. For a few minutes, the only sounds were our shallow breaths and the distant whistle of wind outside. Then Lila scooted closer, pressing her forehead into my chest. "I thought we were going to die out there," she whispered. I pressed my lips to her hair, breathing in the sharp scent of sweat and dust. "So did I admitted. She tilted her head up, her eyes catching what little moonlight filtered through the cracks. "I kept seeing them," she said, her voice trembling. "The reflections, the voices, even after we left the canyon." I swallowed, my throat tight. "They're in us now," I said. "A part of us. We can't ever really leave them behind." Her tears slid down my chest, warm and heavy. "But we're here," she whispered. "We're here, and they aren't." I closed my eyes, letting her words echo in my mind. "We're here," I repeated. "Together." We drifted in and out of a restless sleep, our bodies pressed together for warmth. I woke several times to the sound of Lila whimpering in her sleep, her fingers clawing at my skin as if afraid I might vanish. Each time, I pulled her closer, whispering her name until she calmed. Somewhere around dawn, I jolted awake. A low vibration rattled through the ground beneath us, so faint I thought it might be a dream, but it grew stronger, rising into a deep hum that buzzed in my teeth. Lila woke too, her eyes wide and glassy. "Aiden?" she whispered. I held up a hand, straining to listen. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the broken boards. But beneath it, I heard them, whispers, so faint they felt like echoes of echoes. "Aiden? Lila? Come home! Finish it." Lila pressed her hands over her ears, shaking her head violently. "No, no, we're done, we're done." I grabbed her, forcing her to look at me. "Don't listen," I said, my voice sharp. "Look at me. Right here, only me." Her eyes locked onto mine, tears spilling over her cheeks. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. "They don't stop," she choked out. "Even out here, they don't stop." I pressed my forehead to hers, our breaths mixing. "They can't make us go back," I whispered. "We decide who we are now, not them." She nodded, her shoulders shaking. We stayed like that for a long time, the whispers fading into the dawn light creeping through the cracks. Eventually her breathing steadied and she leaned into me, her whole body going limp with exhaustion. I stared at the sliver of sunrise outside. The sky turned from violet to a bruised orange, then to the pale gold of a new day. We had survived the canyon, we had survived the desert, but the real battle, the one inside us, was just beginning. And as long as we kept each other in sight, as long as we held each other through every whisper and every tremor in the night, we had a chance. A small one, but it was enough. We were still here, together. When the morning sun finally spilled across the shack's splintered floorboards, it felt too bright, too loud, like a spotlight revealing every scar and secret we had tried to bury. Lila stirred first. Her body trembled as she pushed herself upright. Her hair matted to her forehead, her face streaked with dried tears and blood. She looked at me with eyes so raw and hollow I almost couldn't bear it. I forced myself to sit up, every muscle shrieking in protest. My hands were stiff, the burned skin cracked and weeping. I curled them into fists, ignoring the sting. Lila's gaze dropped to my hands, her lips parting in a silent gasp. "Oh God, Aiden," she whispered. I looked down. The old blood patterns, the ones that had once been scratched into my skin, drawn again and again in the canyon, had reappeared, only now they pulsed faintly, as if alive. A slow, cold wave rolled through me. My vision narrowed, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. "They're not done with us," I croaked. Lila shook her head violently, her fingers digging into her scalp. "Dawn. No, we closed it. We finished it." I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to face me. "They marked us," I said, my voice low and shaking. "They left something inside us, like a seed." Tears flooded her eyes again, spilling down her dirt-streaked cheeks. "What does that mean?" she sobbed. "What do we do now?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was pull her into my arms, feeling her sobs rack through her thin frame. We sat like that, pressed together as the sun rose higher, heating the shack until the air shimmered. After a while, she pulled back, her eyes rimmed with red, her jaw clenched in a way I hadn't seen before. "We walk," she said firmly. "We keep moving. Whatever this is, whatever they did to us, we don't let it own us." I swallowed, my throat tight. "Yeah," I said hoarsely, one foot in front of the other. She stood shakily, her legs quivering beneath her. She glanced around the shack, at the shattered cot, the broken basin, the warped walls. I could almost see her realize what I had been thinking all night. We couldn't stay here. The shack wasn't safe. Nothing was. She reached out, offering her hand. "Come on," she said. I took it. We stepped out into the blinding morning light, shielding our eyes against the glare. The desert stretched ahead, a broken sea of sand and rock that seemed to go on forever. Each step away from that shack felt like ripping off a bandage that had grown into my flesh. Painful, liberating, terrifying. We walked for hours in silence. The sun climbed higher, turning the ground into a shimmering mirage. Our shadows dragged behind us, thin and trembling. At one point, Lila stumbled and went to her knees. I dropped beside her immediately, my burned hands hovering helplessly above her shoulders. She looked up at me, her lips dry and cracked, her eyes glazed. "I see them," she whispered. "In the sand, in the sky. They're everywhere." I looked around. The heat waves twisted the air into impossible shapes, phantom figures flickering at the edges of my vision. Faces, hands, that horrible echoing smile. I cupped her face in my hands, despite the pain, forcing her eyes to meet mine. "Focus," I growled. "On me. Only me." Her breaths came in sharp, broken gasps. Slowly, she nodded. We pressed our foreheads together, counting breaths. 1, 2, 3. The same ritual that had saved us in the canyon. The same ritual that kept us human. When she steadied, I pulled her to her feet again. We kept moving. Sometime in the afternoon, we spotted something in the distance, a thin line of asphalt slicing through the desert. A road. We ran, tripping, crawling, dragging each other across the sand until our hands touched the cracked blacktop. I collapsed face first onto it, sobbing with relief. Lila knelt beside me, her fingers digging into the rough surface like she might fuse into it. "We found a road," she choked out. "We actually found it." I rolled over, staring up at the sky, tears streaming into my hair. "Someone will come," I said, gasping. "Someone has to come." We lay there for what felt like forever. The sun began its slow descent, shadows stretching across the road. A soft breeze picked up, rustling Lila's hair across my face. Finally, in the far distance, I heard it, the faint, rhythmic thump of an engine. A shape appeared, shimmering in the heat. A truck, crawling toward us. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, waving my arms weakly. Lila staggered to her feet, screaming hoarsely. The truck slowed, then stopped a few yards away. A man jumped out, his hat shading his shocked face, as he rushed toward us. "Holy shit!" he yelled. "Are you two okay? What the hell happened to you?" Lila collapsed into his arms, sobbing. I crawled toward them, my body barely obeying me. The man helped us into the truck, laying us gently in the back seat. Lila clutched my hand the entire time, her nails biting into my skin. As the truck pulled away, I looked back. The desert stretched behind us, endless and empty. But for a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw it again. The faint outline of that canyon, a black wound on the horizon. A single thin figure standing at its edge, watching us go. I turned away quickly, squeezing Lila's hand. She looked at me, her voice a fragile whisper. "We're going to be okay, right?" I forced a smile, though my stomach twisted into knots. "We're here," I said softly. "We're together. That's enough." She nodded, leaning into me as the truck rattled down the cracked highway, leaving that cursed place behind. But even as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in blood-red light, I felt it, the mark under my skin, crawling. A quiet promise that it wasn't over. Not yet. The truck rattled down that broken desert highway, each bump jarring my bones like small electric shocks. The man driving, a rancher named Walter, we later learned, kept glancing into the rearview mirror, his eyes darting between us and the empty road ahead. Lila sat pressed against me, her head on my shoulder. She'd stopped crying, but her breasts were shallow, her fingers tangled in the frayed edges of my shirt, like she was afraid I might dissolve into sand if she let go. Walter cleared his throat. "You kids from around here?" he asked, his voice cautious, as if he already knew the answer. I tried to speak, but my lips felt like they were stitched shut. Lila's grip on me tightened. Finally, I managed to rasp out a single word. "No." Walter glanced at us again, his brows knitting together. "You folks look like you've been dragged through hell backward," he said. Lila let out a small, broken laugh. It sounded more like a sob. "Something like that," she whispered. Silence settled in the cab. The sun had almost vanished now, the last fingers of light reaching across the desert like dying embers. Every time the truck's headlights swept over the dunes, I half expected to see a figure standing there, watching, calling. I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes. But even in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw it all. The black water, the echoing screams, my own reflection lunging at me on that narrow bridge. The mark on my arm pulsed, a phantom heartbeat I couldn't escape. Lila shifted beside me, her lips brushing against my neck. "They're still there," she murmured, her voice so soft I almost didn't catch it. "They're inside us." I opened my eyes, turning to look at her. Her gaze was distant, fixed somewhere past the windshield, beyond the desert, beyond this world. "I know," I said. My voice was flat, heavy as the canyon walls. Walter finally pulled into a dusty service station on the edge of a tiny town. A few trailers, a diner, and a flickering gas station sign struggling to stay alive. He parked and turned off the engine. "You two need a doctor," he said, his voice low and gentle. "Or at least a place to rest. I'll go find someone." He climbed out, shutting the door carefully behind him. We sat in the sudden hush, the only sounds our ragged breathing and the distant creak of the station's sign twisting in the wind. Layla straightened slowly, her eyes scanning the cracked parking lot and the abandoned trailers beyond. "What do we tell them?" she whispered. I let out a shaky breath, my chest aching. "The truth," I said, echoing the promise I'd made her. "Even if no one believes it." She turned to me, her eyes shining with something like relief, or maybe resignation. "And if they try to send us back?" she asked, her voice cracking on the last word. I clenched my fists in my lap, ignoring the sharp sting of broken skin. "They can't," I said firmly. "We won't let them." She nodded, her lips trembling. Then, without warning, she leaned forward and kissed me. It wasn't soft or gentle. It was desperate, raw, full of everything we couldn't say. Her fingers dug into my hair, and I tasted salt and blood and something older, darker, that clung to us both. When she pulled back, we were both shaking. She pressed her forehead to mine, her breath coming in sharp, stuttering gasps. "We survived," she whispered. "Somehow, we fucking survived." I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead harder against hers. "For now," I said. Footsteps crunched outside the truck. Walter returned, followed by a woman in a nurse's uniform. Her face tightened when she saw us, two ghosts clinging to each other in the back seat. "Oh my God," she breathed, rushing forward. "We need to get them inside, now." They helped us out gently, supporting our weight as if we were made of glass. Lila clung to my side, and I felt her whole body shiver with each breath. They led us into a small back room of the station, dusty but warm. The nurse sat us down on a worn leather couch and began cleaning our wounds, her hands quick but careful. When she reached my arm, she paused, staring at the faint pulsing mark that still twisted under my skin. Her fingers hovered above it, her eyes narrowing. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I met her gaze, my throat tightening. "Don't touch it," I rasped. She hesitated, then nodded slowly and wrapped it in a clean bandage without another word. Walter hovered in the doorway, wringing his hand in his hands. "You kids want the police or someone else?" Lila looked at me, her eyes searching. I took her hand and squeezed it. "No police," I said. "Please." Walter nodded, his expression unreadable. "All right," he said. "You just rest. We'll figure things out." They left us alone then, the room suddenly too quiet, too still. Lila sagged into my side, her head resting on my shoulder. "We can't stay here long," she murmured, her voice muffled against my neck. "I know," I said, "but tonight, we breathe. We rest. Just tonight." She shivered once, then nodded, her fingers knotting into my shirt. I closed my eyes, listening to the low hum of the old refrigerator in the corner, the distant whine of the desert wind outside. For the first time in what felt like years, I let my guard drop, just for a moment. I let myself believe that maybe, somehow, we had earned this sliver of peace. But even as I drifted towards sleep, I felt the mark beneath my bandage pulse softly, a cold, patient reminder that we weren't free. Not really. We were alive. We had each other. And for tonight, that had to be enough. I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window. For a few precious seconds, I forgot. I forgot the canyon, the screams, the taste of blood and black water. I forgot the mark under my skin. I just lay there, feeling Lila's slow, even breathing against my chest, her fingers still tangled in my shirt like an anchor. The rain sounded so normal, so impossibly gentle. But the second I moved, pain lanced up my arms, burning through my nerves like wildfire. I gasped, and Lila jolted awake instantly, her eyes wide and wild. "Aiden," she rasped, her voice cracked and raw. "I'm here," I managed, swallowing the sharp edge of my own panic. Her shoulders slumped in relief. She pressed her forehead into my neck, her breath shaky and warm. "For a moment, I thought I was back there," she whispered. "I thought I lost you again." I wrapped my good arm around her, squeezing as hard as I dared. "You won't," I said. "Not ever." We sat up slowly, the aches in our bodies screaming with every movement. The small room felt different now, smaller, closer. The walls seemed to lean in, shadows clinging in the corners. Lila's eyes darted around nervously. "It feels wrong," she said, her fingers brushing her neck as if trying to rub something invisible away. I scanned the room too. The nurse and Walter had left us alone last night. We hadn't heard them since. I stood shakily, my legs quivering under me. Lila rose beside me, her hand finding mine instantly. "Let's get out of here," I said. "We'll find Walter, get supplies, and keep moving." She nodded, her eyes wide, her breaths shallow. We stepped into the hallway, the floorboards creaking under our weight. The place felt abandoned. The hume of the refrigerator in the corner was gone. A thin layer of dust coated the counter. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing strangely. Silence. Lila squeezed my hand harder. "Something's wrong," she whispered. We pushed open the front door and stepped onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The sky above was a dull, endless gray, as if someone had scraped all the color from it. The town was empty, no cars, no people, no movement. Lila's grip on my hand turned painful. "Aiden, look," she breathed. I turned. On the edge of town, where the road cut back into the desert, a thin black line crawled along the sand, a crack that seemed to split the earth open. Beyond it, the horizon shimmered with a darkness I knew too well. The canyon. It had followed us. Lila stumbled back, her free hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears as she shook her head violently. "No, no, we closed it. We finished it." I felt something move under my skin, slithering up my arm, pulsing. The mark. It flared hot, so bright I thought it might tear me open from the inside. I fell to my knees, my hand slipping from hers. A scream clawed its way up my throat, but I choked it back, biting down until I tasted blood. Lila dropped beside me, her hands cradling my face. "Stay with me," she sobbed. "Aiden, please, you promised." I forced my eyes open. Her face swam before me, cracked lips, tear-streaked cheeks, wild hair. My anchor. "They won't stop," I gasped. "They can't. We're marked. We're the gate now." Her eyes widened, her hands falling from my face to her own chest. We brought it with us," she whispered. A low hum rose from the crack at the edge of town, a vibration that rattled my bones and filled my head with that chorus of impossible voices. "Come home. Finish it. Let us through." I grabbed her hands, pressing them to my chest. "We can't let them win," I rasped. "We can't let them take us completely." She leaned in, her forehead pressed to mine, her tears dripping onto my lips. "How?" she sobbed. "What do we do?" I stared into her eyes, my heart breaking all over again. "We run," I said. "We keep moving. We stay ahead of it. As long as we're together, we're not theirs." Her shoulders shook as she let out a shaky, broken laugh. "You and your fucking plans," she whispered. I managed a twisted smile through the pain. "Yeah," I said, "I'm stubborn that way." She kissed me then, hard, desperate, as if she could burn away the mark inside me with her lips alone. I kissed her back with everything I had left. When we pulled away, the hum had grown louder, rising like a storm rolling in over the desert. The crack at the edge of town had widened, black veins crawling across the sand toward us. I stood, hauling her up with me. "One foot in front of the other," I said, my voice low and steady. She nodded, wiping her tears away with the back of her shaking hand. "Together," she said. We turned toward the open road. Beyond the town, the desert stretched infinite, brutal, alive. The place we had once thought would kill us now felt like our last refuge. We started running. My lungs burned, my heart pounded so loud I thought it might explode. Lila's hand never left mine, her fingers crushing my knuckles, grounding me. Behind us, the town trembled, the black crack devouring buildings, tearing into the earth like a living wound. We didn't look back. We didn't have to. With every step, I felt the mark pulse, but I also felt her hand, warm, real, stubborn. We might never truly escape. The canyon might always echo in our veins, call to us from the darkness, but as long as we kept running, as long as we kept each other in sight, we were free. For now, the sky above began to shift, the gray giving way to a rising sun that looked almost normal. Almost. I glanced at her, the wind ripping at her hair, her eyes blazing with the same fire that had pulled me out of hell, over and over again. "We're still here," I said, gasping. She looked at me, a broken smile tearing across her face. "Together," she answered. And with the canyon screaming behind us and the endless desert ahead, we ran. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. If you're still here, it means you braved every twisted corner, every whisper in the dark, and every heartbeat that threatened to break. Stories like this aren't just about monsters lurking in the shadows. They're about the monsters we carry inside ourselves, the fears we bury, the love we cling to when everything else is lost. Aiden and Lila's journey was brutal, haunting, and raw, but it was also about survival, trust, and that fragile thread of connection that keeps us human. Even when the darkness is clawing at the door, We hope this story stayed with you not just as a horror tale, but as a reminder that sometimes, no matter how deep the abyss, holding someone's hand can pull you back. If you felt something, fear, sadness, hope, please let us know in the comments. Your thoughts and support mean the world to us. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of our future stories. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay human, and remember, we're all still here, together.